Between 1901 and 1914, millions of Edwardian families welcomed revolutionary new inventions into their homes, bringing electricity, chemicals, and radioactive materials into their daily lives. These modern conveniences promised a bright new world of comfort and leisure, but for thousands they delivered painful burns, horrific injuries, and agonizing deaths instead. Here's what life was really like when Edwardian homes became elegant death traps. Hey, if these stories help you sleep, like or subscribe would be cool. Also drop where you're listening from and the time. I check the comments and it's crazy seeing people from like Australia and Norway on the same video. Okay, tonight it's the Edwardian death traps. But hold up. Get comfortable first. I mean it. Fix your pillows, grab that blanket. This one's worth settling in for. The air smells wrong. That's your first thought as consciousness finds you, not the pleasant wood smoke of a Victorian hearth or the familiar coal dust hanging in London air. No, this is something sharper, something that makes the tiny hairs inside your nose prickle uncomfortably. You're lying on a bed that's almost luxuriously soft compared to what most people in 1905 London are sleeping on. The sheets are crisp cotton, not the rough wool scratching against your less fortunate neighbour's skin. From somewhere downstairs, you hear the soft murmur of voices. Servants, already awake and working before dawn. Opening your eyes, you're confused by what you see, or rather, what you don't see. No candles, no gas lamps, yet somehow, on the bedside table beside you glows a perfect sphere of light contained in glass, an electric bulb connected to a decorative lamp. Inside its glass prison, a delicate filament burns steadily, casting warm light around the bedroom of what is clearly an upper-class Edwardian townhouse. You're in a home at the bleeding edge of progress, one of the first fully electrified private residences in London, the pride of Mr. Thomas Harrington, successful banker and enthusiastic early adopter of all things modern, unlike your comfortable bed right now where all the dangers are safely hidden behind proper insulation and safety standards. This beautiful Edwardian bedroom is basically a death trap masquerading as luxury, and you've just woken up in it. "Darling, could you check why the lights in the children's room keep flickering?" calls a woman's voice from the adjacent bathroom. Mrs. Patterson said she received quite a shock when she turned them on yesterday. Just another normal morning in an Edwardian home, where your morning routine might include getting electrocuted. Speaking of electricity, let me paint you a picture. Imagine bringing something completely alien into your home, something invisible that moves through wires that can magically light up a room or power machines, but that nobody really understands yet. That's electricity in the Edwardian home. The Edwardian era began in 1901 when Queen Victoria's son, Edward VII, took the throne. After decades of Victorian restraint, Edward's reign unleashed an explosion of innovation and modernisation. H.G. Wells perfectly captured the spirit of the age when he wrote, "Queen Victoria, like a great paperweight, sat on men's minds, and when she was removed, their ideas blew all over the place haphazardly." And blow they did. Within the first 5 years of Edward's reign, over 140,000 British patents were granted. The middle classes suddenly had disposable income, and they were desperate to fill their homes with new gadgets that would separate them from the working poor. Chief among these new inventions was electricity. Unlike your home, where electricity arrives in a standardized, regulated form, Edwardian homes could receive wildly different voltages depending on which local company supplied them. An electric iron that worked perfectly in Manchester might literally explode if plugged in down the street in Liverpool. You know what's completely insane, Mrs. Harrington says as she emerges from the bathroom, her hair elaborately arranged in the Gibson Girl style so popular in 1905. Lady Winston told me her husband installed the new electric lights himself last weekend. Can you imagine? Handling all that wiring without any training whatsoever? This wasn't unusual. Electricity was so new that there were no professional standards, no safety regulations, and virtually no public understanding of its dangers. Homeowners would often do their own electrical work with predictably disastrous results. In your current bedroom, the wiring in your walls is carefully insulated, grounded, and hidden safely away. But as you sit up in this Edwardian bed, you can actually see the electrical wires running along the baseboards of the room, and these aren't the plastic-coated, properly grounded wires of your home. No, these are just bare wires. In the early days of home electrification, the actual electric cables weren't insulated at all. They just ran through wooden runners around the room. One accidental touch, one curious child's finger, and you'd have a corpse on your hands. Martin's doing the electrical Christmas tree again this year, Mrs. Harrington says with a sigh as she applies powder to her face. It was so beautiful last year, but I swear I could smell burning every time we turned it on. When insulation was finally introduced, they used materials that seem comically dangerous to us now. Paper wrapped in lead, which, fun fact, is extremely flammable. Cloth, or just raw wood. Basically, anything they thought might stop the electricity from escaping. The concept of grounding an electrical circuit, redirecting excess electricity safely to the earth, simply didn't exist. There was nothing at all between you and a lethal jolt. "Did you hear about the Bainbridges?" Mr. Harrington asks as he adjusts his collar. Their oldest boy, Thomas, was apparently climbing in that old oak tree next to their house when he touched an electric wire. Dead instantly. Terrible business. Stories like this were commonplace in Edwardian newspapers. The technology was advancing faster than people's understanding of it, with deadly consequences. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, your feet touching the cold wooden floor. From the other side of the house comes the sound of a door slamming, followed by a child's excited voice. "Father, father, the electrician is here with the new table lamp." This is where it gets really weird. Not content with just having overhead lighting and wall sconces, Edwardian homeowners wanted electricity everywhere, including, I'm not making this up, in their tablecloths. The Parkins illuminating tablecloth from 1902 is possibly the most insane invention of the early electrical era. It was an actual tablecloth with electrical wiring running through the fabric. Small lamps could then be plugged directly into the tablecloth itself, creating what manufacturers promised would be a magical dining experience. In reality, it was more like a death sentence waiting to happen. Imagine spilling a drink at dinner, only for the liquid to seep into your electrified tablecloth. The newspapers of the time were filled with reports of horrific injuries and deaths from these kinds of devices. I can't believe the Hendersons got one of those electric tablecloths, Mr. Harrington says, shaking his head. Absolute madness, though I must admit it did look spectacular at their dinner party last week. Even traditional light fixtures became death traps. Since early homes only had light sockets, wall outlets hadn't been invented yet, people would use adapters to run multiple devices from a single light socket. The cook wants to use both the electric toaster and the kettle this morning, a maid says, popping her head into the bedroom. But I've already got the vacuum cleaner plugged into the adapter in the dining room. This practice led to what electrical engineers called Christmas trees, cascades of adapters all running from a single light socket, each one adding more load to a system never designed to handle it. The wires would overheat, melt through their primitive insulation, and start fires that could destroy entire homes in minutes. And here's where it gets worse. Many Edwardian homes were hybrid systems with both gas and electricity installed side by side. So not only did you have the risk of electrocution, but when the inevitable spark occurred, it could ignite leaking gas and cause catastrophic explosions. "Remember the Wilsons' house on Park Lane?" Mrs. Harrington says quietly. "Gone. Just gone. They say it was the gas pipe running too close to that new electric radiator they installed." You rise from the bed, careful not to touch any of the visible wiring as you make your way to the washstand. The porcelain basin is filled with fresh water, steam still rising from its surface where a servant must have placed it minutes ago. As you splash water on your face, you hear a sharp, crackling sound from the wall, followed by all the lights in the room going out. "Not again," sighs Mr. Harrington. "James," he calls out to a servant, "check the fuse box in the cellar." Modern homes have circuit breakers that automatically cut power when circuits are overloaded. Edwardian homes had rudimentary fuse boxes at best, and they frequently failed. Many homeowners, frustrated by constantly blowing fuses, would replace them with coins or other metal objects that wouldn't melt, effectively removing the one safety feature their electrical systems had. "Father, come quick." The voice of a young boy echoes up the stairs. "The Christmas tree is on fire." This was a common holiday occurrence in Edwardian homes. The first electric Christmas lights were invented in 1882 by Edward Johnson, an associate of Thomas Edison, but they were basically just exposed bulbs hanging from bare wires. By the Edwardian period, they had become popular among the wealthy, despite being incredibly dangerous. The lights generated intense heat, the wires were barely insulated, and they were often draped over highly flammable pine trees that had been sitting indoors drying out for weeks. It's a wonder every Christmas didn't end in tragedy. From downstairs comes the sound of shouting and the frantic splashing of water. You make your way to the landing, looking down to see servants rushing buckets of water to the smoking remains of a Christmas tree. "Not water, you fools," Mr. Harrington shouts. "You'll be electrocuted, use sand." This was another deadly problem with early electricity. Few people understood that water conducts electricity, making electrical fires particularly dangerous to fight. Many would-be rescuers became victims themselves when they tried to douse electrical fires with water. In the midst of this chaos, a delivery boy arrives at the front door struggling under the weight of a large wooden crate. "Delivery for Mr. Harrington," he calls out. "Your new electric massage machine from Dr. Macora. If normal household appliances were dangerous, Edwardian personal care devices were in a league of their own. Electric massage machines, hair curlers, and even early exercise equipment were all powered by the same unregulated, unsafe electrical systems." The Edwardian period saw the birth of what we now call wellness technology, and it was every bit as dubious then as some of it is now. Electric vibrating machines promised to cure everything from headaches to constipation, all while plugged into those same dangerous light sockets. "Oh, my new massage machine!" Mrs. Harrington claps her hands excitedly. "The ladies at the club say it's marvellous for circulation. Plug it in, James." The unfortunate servant looks hesitantly at the still smoking Christmas tree before reluctantly taking the device and searching for an available light socket. Another area where electricity proved particularly hazardous was in the bathroom, a room that, for the first time, was beginning to feature running water alongside electrical appliances. The combination was as lethal as you'd expect. "Has anyone seen my electric hair curler?" calls the teenage daughter of the house from another room. "I left it plugged in by the bathtub." You cringe at the thought. Modern bathrooms have special GFCI outlets designed to prevent electrocution when water is present. Edwardian bathrooms had no such protection. Electric heaters, hair curlers, and even early blow dryers were used right next to bathtubs with no safety measures whatsoever. The bathroom was perhaps the most dangerous room in an Edwardian home, combining electricity with water in ways that regularly proved fatal. Newspaper reports frequently described people found dead in their bathtubs, electrocuted by nearby appliances that had fallen into the water or simply shorted out due to the humid environment. "I read the most awful story in the paper yesterday," Mrs. Harrington says, as the family gathers for breakfast. A woman in Manchester was found dead in her bath. Apparently, her electric heater fell in while she was bathing. "These things happen," Mr. Harrington replies casually, as if discussing the weather. "Price of progress, my dear." And that's really what it was about. Progress at any cost. The Edwardians were so enchanted with the possibilities of electricity that they were willing to accept the risks, or perhaps more accurately, they simply didn't understand the risks they were taking. As you sit down to breakfast, you notice even more electrical hazards in the dining room. The electric chandelier hanging over the table is connected to the ceiling by exposed wires. The electric toaster on the sideboard has a frayed cord, and there, in the corner, is an early electric heater with metal coils glowing red hot placed dangerously close to the curtains. "We're thinking of converting the kitchen entirely to electric," Mr. Harrington announces proudly. "No more coal dust or gas fumes." Mrs. Phillips next door says her cook is absolutely thrilled with their new electric range. What Mr. Harrington doesn't mention is that early electric stoves were essentially just exposed heating elements with knobs. No insulation, no safety features, and certainly no automatic shut-offs. Cooks and servants suffered terrible burns, and kitchen fires were common. The wealthy Edwardians who could afford electricity viewed it as a status symbol, something that separated them from the working classes who still relied on gas, coal, and candles. Having an electrified home meant you were modern, sophisticated, and on the cutting edge of society. But the reality was far less glamorous than the image. The servants who maintained these electrical systems suffered the most, experiencing shocks, burns, and sometimes death as they struggled to operate technology they didn't understand. "James got a terrible shock trying to change a bulb in the library yesterday," whispers a maid to another as they serve breakfast. "His hand went all stiff and he couldn't feel his arm for hours afterward. The doctor says he's lucky to be alive." As breakfast concludes, Mr. Harrington rises to his feet. "I've got something special to show you all," he announces with pride. "I've had the latest electrical marvel installed in my study." The family follows him excitedly, and you trail behind, curious about what new danger awaits. Inside the wood-panelled study, Mr. Harrington gestures dramatically toward his desk where a strange contraption sits. "Behold," he exclaims, "the electro-vigor." The device looks like something from a mad scientist's laboratory, a box with dials and switches connected to a series of metal pads and straps. "It's the latest in electrical health technology," he explains. "You attach these pads to your body, turn on the current, and it revitalizes your entire system. The American physician who invented it guarantees it will add 10 years to my life." What Mr. Harrington doesn't realize is that he's basically describing electrocution as a health treatment. These therapeutic electrical devices were completely unregulated and often delivered dangerous shocks to users. Many caused burns, nerve damage, and in some cases, death. "I've been using it for a week now," Mr. Harrington continues, rolling up his sleeve to reveal an angry red burn on his arm. "The burn means it's working, drawing out the toxins, you see." The family nods appreciatively, completely unaware of the danger. This was typical of the era, a blind faith in technology and scientific treatments that were anything but scientific. As Mr. Harrington prepares to demonstrate the device, there's another electrical calamity. The study lights begin to flicker, then go out entirely. "James," Mr. Harrington calls irritably, "the fuses again." "I've already replaced them twice this morning, sir," comes the weary reply from the hallway. This was another common problem in Edwardian homes. The electrical systems were simply not designed to handle the ever-increasing number of devices being plugged into them. Fuses would blow constantly, leading many homeowners to use higher-rated fuses than their wiring could safely handle, or to bypass the fuse system altogether. "Just use a penny in the fuse box," Mr. Harrington instructs. "That'll keep it from blowing again." This dangerous practice, substituting coins for proper fuses, was alarmingly common and led to countless fires. The fuses were designed to blow when the current got too high, protecting the system from overheating. Bypassing them removed this protection. As the lights flicker back on, Mrs. Harrington checks her watch. "I'm late for my appointment with Dr. Fisher," she says. "He's going to treat my nerves with the new electric chair." She doesn't mean an execution device, of course, but rather another of the era's dubious electrical medical treatments. The electric chair she's referring to would send currents through the patient's body, supposedly treating everything from hysteria to digestive problems. Like most Edwardian electrical medical devices, it was based on pseudoscience at best and was often dangerous. But it was marketed as the pinnacle of modern medical technology, and wealthy patients flocked to try it. "And I'm off to the club," Mr. Harrington announces. "They've just installed electric lights in the billiards room. No more playing in that ghastly gaslight." As the family disperses for their daily activities, you're left alone in the house with the servants, who are now busily cleaning around all the dangerous electrical fixtures. "Mind the wires, Mary," an older maid instructs a younger one who's dusting near an exposed electrical connection. "Mrs. Simmons at Lord Blackwood's house was killed last month when her metal duster touched one of those." The casual way she says this, as if discussing the proper way to polish silver, is chilling. For the servant class, these new electrical dangers were just one more hazard in an already dangerous existence. As you wander through the house, you spot the youngest Harrington child, a boy of about 7, playing near an electrical outlet in the hallway. He's holding a metal letter opener, and to your horror, you realise he's about to poke it into the socket. "I wonder what happens if he begins. "Stop!" you shout, rushing toward him. The boy looks up in surprise, dropping the letter opener. "I was just curious," he says with a shrug. "Father says electricity is like a magical servant that lives in the walls." This was part of the problem. Electricity was so poorly understood that even adults described it in magical, mystical terms. Children weren't adequately warned of its dangers because many parents didn't fully understand those dangers themselves. "It's not magic," you tell him firmly. "It's dangerous. It can hurt you very badly." The boy looks skeptical. "Father says it's perfectly safe as long as you don't touch the wires, but how can something you can't see hurt you?" How indeed. This was the challenge of the early electrical age, teaching people to fear something invisible, something they couldn't smell, taste, or hear until it was too late. As the day progresses, you witness more electrical hazards throughout the house. The cook receives a shock from a faulty switch in the kitchen. A parlourmaid narrowly avoids setting fire to the curtains with an electric lamp placed too close to the fabric. The gardener, working outside, almost cuts through a buried electrical cable with his shovel. Each incident is treated as a minor inconvenience, not the potentially fatal hazard it actually is. This casual attitude toward electrical danger was typical of the era, a time when people were still learning, often through tragic experience, the rules of electrical safety. By evening, the family has returned home, and preparations for dinner are underway. The dining room is illuminated by the chandelier, which casts a warm glow over the table. It looks magical, but you can't help noticing the exposed wires running along the ceiling. "We're having the Pembrokes over tomorrow," Mrs. Harrington tells her husband. "Should we use the electric tablecloth? Lady Pembroke hasn't seen it yet, and I know she'd be terribly impressed." "Absolutely," Mr. Harrington agrees, "and let's use the new electric candles too. The whole works." As they discuss their plans, you notice the youngest son sneaking back toward that same electrical outlet, his curiosity apparently undeterred by your earlier warning. This time you decide to follow the boy without intervening. Perhaps this is a teaching moment that needs to happen, though you'll step in before any real harm occurs. The boy approaches the outlet cautiously, looking around to make sure no one's watching. He's carrying a different metal object now, a small toy soldier with a sword extended. Just as he's about to insert it into the socket, a servant rounds the corner, sees what he's about to do, and shouts in alarm. "Master Henry, stop that this instant!" The boy jumps, dropping the toy. "I just wanted to see what would happen," he mutters. "What would happen," the servant says sternly, "is that you'd get a nasty shock or worse. My cousin's boy did that with a knitting needle last year. Blew him clear across the room, it did. Never been right since." The servant picks up the toy and hands it back to the boy. "Electricity isn't a toy, Master Henry. It's dangerous, like fire, but worse because you can't see it." This was how electrical safety knowledge spread through Edwardian society, through stories of accidents and near misses passed from person to person like folk wisdom. There were no public safety campaigns, no educational programs in schools, just the accumulated knowledge of a society learning through trial and error. As evening falls and the family gathers for dinner, the dangers don't subside. If anything, they multiply. More lights are turned on, more appliances are used. The electrical system of the house groans under the strain. The lights keep dimming in the kitchen, a servant reports. Cook says she can hardly see to prepare the vegetables. "Tell her to turn off the electric kettle when she's using the stove," Mr. Harrington replies impatiently. "We can't have everything on at once." This was another common issue. Early home electrical systems simply weren't designed to handle multiple appliances running simultaneously. But as more electrical gadgets entered the home, families tried to use them all at once, with predictably dangerous results. Dinner is served under the glow of the electric chandelier. The family chatters excitedly about their day, oblivious to the potential dangers hanging quite literally over their heads. "I saw the most marvellous thing at Lady Westmer's today," Mrs. Harrington says as she delicately cuts her roast beef. "An electric piano. It plays itself. Can you imagine? We simply must get one. Perhaps for Christmas," Mr. Harrington agrees, eyeing his wine glass thoughtfully. "Though I do wonder where we'll put it. We're running out of places to plug things in." "Couldn't we have more of those adapter things?" his wife suggests. "The ones that let you plug multiple devices into one socket?" "Brilliant idea," Mr. Harrington exclaims, completely unaware that he's proposing to make their home even more dangerous. As the meal concludes and the family retires to the drawing room, a maid begins clearing the table. She accidentally knocks a glass of water onto the tablecloth, fortunately not the electric one, which is being saved for tomorrow's dinner party. Lucky that wasn't the special tablecloth, she mutters to another servant. Remember what happened at the Richardsons? The other servant nods gravely. All those burns and the fire, terrible business. Yet despite these dangers, the march of electrical progress continued unabated. The Edwardians were in love with the idea of a modern, electrified future, and they were willing to accept the risks that came with it. As the evening draws to a close, the family begins to retire to their bedrooms. Lights are switched off one by one, but the danger doesn't diminish. If anything, it increases as the family sleeps unaware of the potential hazards lurking in their walls. Mr. Harrington is the last to go upstairs. He makes his nightly rounds, checking that doors are locked and fires are out, but he pays no attention to the overloaded light socket in the hallway or the frayed wire on the lamp in his study. As he climbs the stairs, he passes you on the landing. "Remarkable thing, electricity," he says with a smile. "Changed everything, hasn't it? Makes you wonder what they'll come up with next." With that, he disappears into his bedroom, leaving you alone in the dimly lit hallway of this beautiful, deadly Edwardian home. And as you stand there, listening to the quiet hum of electricity flowing through the walls around you, you can't help but think how lucky you are to live in a time when these dangers are understood and controlled, when you can flip a light switch without risking your life. Unlike your own safe modern bedroom, the Edwardian house around you is a beautiful death trap filled with technological wonders that no one fully understands and dangers that no one adequately fears. You make your way back to the guest bedroom, carefully avoiding touching any switches or wires as you go. As you settle into bed, you notice something you missed this morning. A small electric heater placed near the curtains, its coils still glowing faintly red in the darkness. You get up and unplug it, just to be safe, because in an Edwardian home, safety was always an afterthought, if it was thought of at all. Progress came first, understanding second, and safety a distant third. Sounds a lot like the early days of social media, doesn't it? And as you drift off to sleep in this elegant electrical death trap of an Edwardian home, you can't help but wonder what other deadly surprises await in the morning. Morning arrives with the gentle rattle of a servant laying coal in the bedroom fireplace. Despite the Harringtons' modern electric lights, they still rely on traditional fires for warmth. The chill of the early morning seeps through the elegant wallpaper, reminding you that Edwardian luxury has its limits. "Will you be joining the family for breakfast, sir?" the maid asks, keeping her eyes respectfully downcast. "Mrs. Harrington mentioned you might like to see the new icebox that arrived yesterday." Ah yes, the infamous Edwardian refrigerator, another marvel of modern technology that's just as likely to kill you as it is to keep your butter from melting. You dress quickly, curious about this latest addition to the Harringtons' collection of deadly conveniences. As you descend the grand staircase, you notice a workman struggling to maneuver an enormous wooden cabinet through the front door. "Careful with that," Mr. Harrington supervises, from a safe distance. "It cost more than your yearly wage." The workman's face reddens with the effort, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Yes, sir. Very delicate, sir." What they're wrestling with is the pride of the Edwardian kitchen, a state-of-the-art refrigerator, though nothing like the sleek appliance humming quietly in your kitchen at home. This monstrosity looks like a piece of furniture that swallowed a scientific laboratory. "Isn't she a beauty?" Mr. Harrington beams, patting the side of the wooden cabinet as the workmen finally position it in the kitchen. The very latest model uses ammonia as the refrigerant, absolutely cutting edge. The cook eyes the machine suspiciously, keeping a safe distance. "And you're sure this thing is safe, sir? Mrs. Pemberton down the street had one explode last month, took out half her kitchen wall." Mr. Harrington waves away her concern. "Progress always has its little accidents, Mrs. Brown. Can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, what?" Little accidents. That's a fun way of describing the lethal reality of early refrigeration technology. Unlike your fridge at home, which uses sealed refrigerant systems and electric motors, these early cooling machines were basically bombs waiting to go off. "So how exactly does this work?" you ask, approaching the imposing cabinet cautiously. Mr. Harrington's chest swells with pride. "Allow me to demonstrate, James. Fetch the engineer." While we wait for the engineer to appear, let me tell you about the absolute horror show that was early refrigeration. Food preservation was a major issue in Edwardian times. Before mechanical refrigeration, people relied on ice harvested from lakes and rivers in winter, stored in insulated ice houses, and distributed throughout the year. "Did I ever tell you about the Great Ice Famine of 1890? Mr. Harrington asks, leaning against the kitchen counter. Terrible business. Warm winter meant no ice harvest. By August, people were dying from food poisoning left and right. Couldn't keep anything fresh. It's not an exaggeration. Food spoilage was a deadly serious issue in the Edwardian period. Without reliable refrigeration, meat turned rancid, milk soured, and vegetables rotted, all harbouring bacteria that could cause serious illness or death. The engineer arrives, a serious-looking man with oil-stained hands and a wary respect for the machine he's about to explain. He opens a panel at the back of the refrigerator, revealing a complex system of pipes, valves, and containers. "Now, sir," he begins, "this model uses a compression cycle with ammonia as the refrigerant. The motor here compresses the gas, which heats up. Then it cools in these condensing coils, turning to liquid. The liquid passes through this expansion valve, which drops the pressure, causing the liquid to evaporate and cool rapidly." "Fascinating," Mr. Harrington exclaims, though it's clear he doesn't fully understand. The engineer continues, his voice taking on a cautionary tone. "Very important, sir, that these seals remain tight. Ammonia gas is extremely toxic if inhaled, causes severe burns to the lungs, and can be fatal in high concentrations." Mrs. Harrington, who has just entered the kitchen, pales visibly. "Fatal? You didn't mention that when you ordered it, Thomas." "All the best refrigerators use ammonia, my dear," Mr. Harrington assures her, "or methyl chloride or sulfur dioxide. Perfectly safe as long as it stays in the pipes. That's a pretty big as long as, considering these machines were hand-built with rubber seals and soldered joints that frequently leaked. The refrigerant gases he's casually listing off are nightmarishly dangerous. Let's take ammonia. If you've ever used ammonia-based cleaning products, you know how the fumes can make your eyes water and your throat burn. Now imagine that concentrated 100 times and leaking into your kitchen in the middle of the night. Ammonia gas causes immediate burning of the eyes, nose, throat, and respiratory tract. In high concentrations, it causes pulmonary edema. Your lungs fill with fluid, and you essentially drown in your own secretions. Methyl chloride wasn't any better. This gas could cause severe neurological symptoms, including confusion, dizziness, and loss of consciousness. Long-term exposure led to permanent nerve damage, and it was flammable too, a perfect combination of poison and fire hazard. Then there was sulfur dioxide, which forms sulfurous acid on contact with the moist tissues of your eyes and lungs. Imagine having acid dumped directly into your respiratory system. That's what breathing sulfur dioxide feels like. "What's that noise it's making?" Mrs. Harrington asks nervously, as the refrigerator emits a low, ominous hum. That's just the motor, Ma'am, the engineer explains. It'll run for several hours, then shut off once it's cold enough inside. Then it'll start again when it warms up. And the smell? She wrinkles her nose. The engineer frowns, sniffing the air. There shouldn't be any smell, Ma'am. If you can smell ammonia, that means there's a leak. A sudden tension fills the kitchen. The engineer approaches the machine again, this time more cautiously. He runs his hand along the pipes at the back, checking the connections. I think it's just the newness of the metal, ma'am. No leak that I can detect, but if you ever notice a sharp, pungent odour like cat urine but stronger, everyone should leave the room immediately and open all the windows. Mr. Harrington claps his hands together. Well, there you have it, our very own modern refrigeration machine. No more depending on the iceman. We can keep food fresh right here in our own kitchen. The cook still looks sceptical. And how am I supposed to cook with this monster taking up half my kitchen? Progress requires some sacrifices, Mrs. Brown, Mr. Harrington says loftily. The engineer packs up his tools and gives the machine one final inspection. I've left the operation manual here, sir. Please read it carefully. And remember, if you hear any unusual noises or detect any strange odours— Yes, we'll be careful, Mr. Harrington interrupts, already bored with the safety lecture. As the engineer leaves, the family gathers around their new acquisition, marvelling at the technological wonder. Little Henry, the young boy you saved from electrocution yesterday, peers inside the cabinet. "It's cold," he exclaims in delight. "Like winter." "Exactly," his father says proudly. "We've captured winter in a box." But what they've actually captured is a toxic gas under pressure, contained by rudimentary technology in the heart of their home. Your modern refrigerator uses sealed systems and safer refrigerants. Theirs is basically a time bomb with butter inside. After breakfast, you join Mr. Harrington in his study, where he's excitedly unwrapping another new appliance, an electric fan. "The heat in the summer is absolutely unbearable," he explains, setting the fan on his desk. "This should make things much more comfortable. The fan is nothing like the plastic safety-guarded models you're familiar with. This is a brass and iron contraption with exposed wiring and completely unprotected blades that spin at alarming speeds." "Feel that breeze," Mr. Harrington exclaims, switching it on. The blades become nearly invisible as they spin, creating a genuine hazard to anyone who might accidentally put a hand too close. "Marvellous, isn't it?" You nod, keeping a healthy distance from the whirring death trap. No finger guards, no automatic shut-off if something gets caught in the blades, and of course, the same dodgy electrical connections as everything else in the house. "Father, can I touch it?" young Henry asks, approaching the fan with extended fingers. "No." You and Mr. Harrington shout simultaneously. Mr. Harrington grabs his son's hand. "The blades are very sharp, son. They could cut your fingers right off." Henry's eyes widen. "Really? Can we try it with a sausage?" "What a morbid suggestion," Mrs. Harrington says, entering the study, "though I admit I'm curious as well." This casual approach to potentially lethal technology was typical of the era. Edwardian homes were filled with dangerous appliances that we would never allow around children today, yet children were expected to simply learn through, often painful, experience, which devices were safe to touch and which weren't. "Oh, Thomas, Lady Pembroke just telephoned," Mrs. Harrington says. "She's bringing her new vacuum cleaner to demonstrate after lunch. Isn't that exciting?" And here comes another dangerous Edwardian contraption. Early vacuum cleaners were enormous fuel-powered monsters that combined the worst aspects of internal combustion engines and poorly insulated electrical systems. "The improved puffing billy?" Mr. Harrington asks with interest. "I hear it's quite revolutionary." Yes, though apparently it takes 2 footmen to operate it, Mrs. Harrington replies, and she mentioned something about keeping buckets of sand nearby just in case. In case of what, you might wonder? Well, early vacuums had a tendency to backfire, overheat, or simply burst into flames. The first models weren't even electric. They used gasoline engines that would literally be running inside your house, spewing exhaust fumes and presenting a constant fire hazard. By lunchtime, the house is abuzz with activity. Servants are preparing for Lady Pembroke's visit, and the new refrigerator in the kitchen has reached its operating temperature. Cook says we can have ice cream for dessert today, Henry says excitedly as you take your seat at the dining table. The icebox made it, Mrs. Harrington smiles proudly. Our first refrigerated dessert. Isn't technology wonderful? You're about to reply when a loud hissing sound comes from the kitchen, followed by a scream and the sound of breaking glass. Mr. Harrington jumps to his feet. What the devil? The family rushes to the kitchen to find the cook standing by the open window, gasping for breath, while a maid lies unconscious on the floor. A thin, barely visible vapour is seeping from the back of the refrigerator. Ammonia leak, you shout, recognising the acrid smell. Everyone out now. Mr. Harrington doesn't hesitate. He scoops up the unconscious maid while you grab young Henry, and the family evacuates to the garden. James, open all the windows in the house, Mr. Harrington orders the butler, and telephone for the engineer immediately. As servants rush to ventilate the house, you check on the maid. She's breathing, but shallowly, her face flushed and her eyes watering even in unconsciousness. She needs a doctor, you tell Mr. Harrington. Ammonia can cause serious lung damage. Mrs. Harrington is pale with shock. I thought you said it was safe, Thomas. It is safe, he insists, though with less conviction than before. Just a minor mechanical issue, I'm sure. This wasn't an uncommon scene in Edwardian homes that adopted early refrigeration technology. Refrigerant leaks caused countless injuries and deaths. The gases used were chosen for their thermodynamic properties, with almost no consideration for human safety. A doctor arrives shortly before the engineer returns. The maid is taken to her room, diagnosed with chemical burns to her respiratory tract. She'll recover, the doctor assures the family, but she's fortunate she wasn't exposed longer. Ammonia can be deadly. The engineer examines the refrigerator with a grave expression. Seal failure on the main compression chamber, he explains. Not uncommon in a new machine. The vibration sometimes loosens the fittings during transport. But you can fix it, Mr. Harrington asks anxiously. Oh, certainly, sir. Just need to replace the seal and recharge the system. The engineer hesitates, though I should mention this model has had some incidents at other homes. Nothing serious, just minor leaks and the occasional small fire. Fire? Mrs. Harrington repeats faintly. It can catch fire too. The engineer looks uncomfortable. Well, Mum, if the motor overheats and there happens to be a gas leak near an ignition source, he doesn't need to finish the sentence. The implication is clear enough. Their expensive new refrigerator could potentially explode, releasing toxic gas and starting a fire all at once. While the engineer works to repair the refrigerator, Lady Pembroke arrives with her vacuum cleaner, or rather her footmen arrive carrying it while she supervises. The device is almost comically huge, resembling a small steam engine more than a modern vacuum. It's the very latest thing, Lady Pembroke announces proudly. Powered by petrol, none of that unreliable electricity. Because clearly, what every home needs is an internal combustion engine running indoors. The vacuum cleaner consists of a gasoline motor connected to a series of hoses and brushes. The noise when they start it is deafening, and the smell of exhaust quickly fills the drawing room. Perhaps we should open a window, you suggest, already feeling lightheaded from the fumes. "Nonsense!" Lady Pembroke shouts over the roar. "This is the smell of modernity." The footmen manoeuvre the enormous machine across the carpet while Lady Pembroke points out its features. "See how it sucks everything up? And it only weighs 50 pounds. My footman can easily move it from room to room." The poor servants look less than thrilled with this arrangement, struggling with the unwieldy device as it belches smoke and vibrates alarmingly. One of them has visible burns on his hands from the hot engine housing. "And how often does it need refuelling?" Mr. Harrington asks, eyeing the machine with a mixture of fascination and concern. "Oh, every hour or so," Lady Pembroke replies casually, "though one must be careful when adding petrol. There was an unfortunate incident at the Blackwoods last week." Their drawing-room curtains caught fire. Mrs. Harrington looks horrified, but her husband is clearly tempted by this latest technological marvel. "Perhaps we should get one, my dear. Think of the time it would save the maids. The maids who would have to carry a 50-pound engine up and down the stairs?" Mrs. Harrington asks pointedly. Before Mr. Harrington can respond, there's a sputtering sound from the vacuum, followed by a small backfire that makes everyone jump. A plume of black smoke erupts from the motor. "Just needs adjusting," one of the footmen says quickly, his expression suggesting this happens regularly. He fiddles with something on the engine, and the sputtering subsides. Lady Pembroke carries on as if nothing unusual has happened. "As I was saying, it's so much more hygienic than sweeping. All the dust is collected in this bag, you see." The bag in question appears to be made of some flammable fabric and is positioned directly above the hot engine. You make a mental note of the nearest exit, just in case. After the vacuum demonstration concludes, mercifully without any fires or explosions, the conversation over tea turns to other modern appliances that are transforming Edwardian homes. "The Wilkinsons have just installed an electric washing machine," Lady Pembroke informs the group, "though I hear it shook so violently during the spin cycle that it broke through the laundry room floor and fell into the cellar." Everyone laughs as if this is a charming anecdote rather than a terrifying structural failure. Early washing machines were indeed dangerous contraptions with exposed motors, minimal safety features, and a tendency to vibrate violently enough to walk across rooms. "And what about electric irons?" Mrs. Harrington adds. "My sister says hers caught fire last month while she was using it. The cords simply melted." Again, this is treated as an amusing quirk rather than a serious safety issue. Edwardian electric irons had no temperature controls, no automatic shutoffs, and frequently overheated to the point of combustion. The insulation on the cords was rudimentary at best, and fires were common. "Progress has its little inconveniences," Mr. Harrington says with a chuckle. "Little inconveniences. Is that what we're calling household fires and toxic gas leaks now?" You can't help but comment. There's an awkward pause before Lady Pembroke laughs. "How refreshing to meet someone who speaks so directly. But surely you can't deny that these modern conveniences make life so much more comfortable, despite the occasional mishap." "I suppose it depends on how you define comfort," you reply. "Is it comfortable to worry that your refrigerator might poison your family in the night, or that your vacuum cleaner might burn your house down?" Mr. Harrington frowns. "You sound like my father. He refused to have gas lighting installed because he'd read about an explosion in some home in Manchester, lived his entire life by candlelight, the old fossil. If everyone thought that way, we'd never advance." "There's advancing, and then there's advancing responsibly," you point out. "Testing for safety before putting devices in homes with children. Testing costs money," Lady Pembroke dismisses, "and delays progress. Better to get these marvellous inventions into homes quickly. Don't you think the minor risks are simply the price of being modern?" This attitude, that safety was less important than being on the cutting edge, was pervasive among the Edwardian upper classes. New technology was a status symbol, regardless of the dangers it presented, and since servants typically bore the brunt of the risks, operating these dangerous devices daily, the wealthy owners could maintain a certain detachment from the very real hazards in their homes. As evening approaches, the engineer finally completes his repairs on the refrigerator. "Good as new, sir," he assures Mr. Harrington, "though I'd recommend having it serviced monthly, just to be safe." Mr. Harrington nods absently, already focused on his next technological acquisition. "I'm thinking of getting an electric clothes dryer next," he tells you as you head upstairs to prepare for dinner. "They say it can dry a shirt in under an hour. Isn't that remarkable?" You think about the combination of high heat, flammable lint and questionable electrical connections that an early clothes dryer would represent and suppress a shudder. Remarkable indeed. In your room, as you change for dinner, you hear a hissing sound that makes your blood run cold. Rushing to the window, you throw it open and take a deep breath of fresh air before investigating. The sound is coming from the bathroom next door. Opening the bathroom door cautiously, you discover the source, a new device installed beside the bathtub. It's an early water heater using gas to heat water directly in the bathroom. The pilot light has gone out and gas is leaking into the enclosed space. You quickly turn the valve to shut off the gas supply, then open the bathroom window wide. Another disaster narrowly averted. This was yet another deadly convenience of the Edwardian home. Instant hot water provided by gas heaters installed directly in bathrooms with minimal ventilation. Carbon monoxide poisoning was common, as was gas asphyxiation when pilot lights failed. As you head down to dinner, reflecting on yet another brush with death courtesy of Edwardian technology, you can't help but wonder what other lethal innovations await in this house of deadly convenience. But that's a worry for tomorrow. Tonight you'll be dining under that electrified chandelier in a room warmed by an unvented gas heater, eating food preserved by toxic chemicals in a refrigerator that's already tried to kill one person today. Just another evening in an Edwardian home where comfort and convenience come with a side of mortal peril, and the line between cutting-edge technology and elaborate death trap is vanishingly thin. The following morning, you wake to the sound of hammering and men's voices. The Harrington household is already abuzz with activity despite the early hour. Dust motes dance in the sunlight streaming through your bedroom window as you rise, curious about the commotion. You dress quickly and follow the noise to what will become the new nursery. Mrs. Harrington had mentioned at dinner last night that she was having the room renovated for her sister's upcoming visit with her newborn. "Ah, there you are," Mr. Harrington calls when he spots you in the doorway. He's supervising 3 workmen who are installing what appears to be a new type of wall covering. "Come see the latest innovation in home safety," you approach cautiously, having learned that innovation in an Edwardian home usually means new and exciting way to die. "Asbestos," Mr. Harrington announces proudly, patting the grey-white material the workers are attaching to the walls. "Completely fireproof. The Romans called it the miracle mineral. We're lining the entire nursery with it for safety." One of the workers coughs violently, a handkerchief pressed to his mouth. Fine white dust hangs in the air, sparkling in the sunlight like tiny stars. You instinctively hold your breath. "Safety," you repeat, fighting the urge to run from the room. Of all the hidden killers lurking in the Edwardian home, asbestos might be the most insidious. Unlike the electricity that could shock you instantly, or the refrigerator that might poison you overnight, asbestos kills slowly, invisibly, decades after exposure. "Think about it," Mr. Harrington continues enthusiastically. "A completely fireproof nursery. No need to worry about candles or gas lamps causing fires with the little ones around." The The worker, who was coughing, straightens up, wiping his mouth. There's a faint smear of blood on the handkerchief, which he quickly pockets. "Begging your pardon, sir, just some dust in the throat." Mr. Harrington barely notices. The material is amazing. Lightweight, strong, excellent insulator for both heat and sound, and cheap. That's the best part. "Where else are you using it in the house?" you ask, dreading the answer. "Where aren't we using it?" Mr. Harrington laughs. "It's in the attic insulation, wrapped around all the hot water pipes, in the flooring tiles in the kitchen, lining the boiler room, even in the wallpaper in the dining room. You think of all the meals you've eaten in that dining room, the invisible fibres drifting down onto the food." The worker coughs again, more violently this time. "Perhaps you need some fresh air, Jenkins," Mr. Harrington suggests, finally noticing the man's distress. "I'm fine, sir," Jenkins insists, though his face is pale beneath the dust coating it. "Been working with this stuff for 10 years now. 10 years. You wonder how his lungs look inside. Like the insulation he's installing, probably, coated with tiny, razor-sharp fibres that can never be removed." 10 years, eh? Mr. Harrington nods approvingly. "A true veteran, then tell our guest about the wonders of asbestos, Jenkins." Jenkins straightens up, clearly flattered by the attention from his social superior. "Best material ever discovered, sir. Doesn't burn, doesn't rot, doesn't conduct electricity, mixes with cement, plaster, fabric, anything really. They're even making clothes out of it now." "Clothes?" you echo in disbelief. "Oh yes," Mr. Harrington confirms. "Fireproof suits for firefighters, aprons for factory workers dealing with heat. Marvellous stuff. I'm having an asbestos smoking jacket made, actually. No more worries about stray embers from my pipe." The worker named Jenkins suddenly doubles over in another coughing fit, this one worse than before. He staggers toward the door, waving off assistance from his colleagues. "I just need some air," he gasps, pushing past you into the hallway. Mr. Harrington shakes his head. "Poor fellow probably has the consumption. It's rampant among the working classes, you know. Terrible diet, overcrowded housing. No wonder their health suffers." The cruel irony of his statement hangs in the air along with the asbestos fibres. Jenkins doesn't have tuberculosis. He's dying from the miracle mineral he's been handling for a decade. "Should we perhaps open a window?" you suggest, looking at the dust still swirling in the room. "The air seems rather dense." Mr. Harrington laughs. "Nonsense. A bit of dust never hurt anyone. Besides, the asbestos dust is perfectly safe, harmless as talcum powder." If only he knew. The invisible killer surrounding you works its destruction fibre by fibre, breath by breath. When inhaled, asbestos fibres lodge in the lungs, causing scarring, inflammation, and eventually deadly cancers that won't be diagnosable for decades. The sound of a woman's voice interrupts these grim thoughts. Mrs. Harrington appears in the doorway, her face lighting up at the sight of the renovations. "Oh, it's coming along splendidly," she exclaims, "and we're using the very best materials, I see. Nothing but the finest for my little niece." One of the remaining workers beams at this recognition. "Yes, ma'am, this here's the top-grade white asbestos from Canada. Costs a pretty penny, but worth every shilling for the little one's safety." Mrs. Harrington nods approvingly, then turns to you. "Isn't it wonderful? The nursery will be completely fireproof. Such peace of mind for my sister." You manage a weak smile, unable to explain that this safety measure is anything but safe. The Edwardian faith in asbestos was absolute and widespread. The material was viewed as a technological miracle, the perfect solution to the very real danger of household fires in an age of open flames and faulty electrical wiring. "I understand you're using asbestos in many parts of the house," you say carefully. "Oh, everywhere," Mrs. Harrington confirms cheerfully. "My friend Lady Westmore has asbestos curtains in her drawing room. Can you imagine? She demonstrated their fireproof quality by holding a match to them at her last dinner party. Didn't even scorch." "Fascinating," you murmur, imagining the invisible deadly fibres released by such a demonstration floating down onto the dinner guests and their food. "Come," Mr. Harrington says, leading you out of the nursery. "Let me show you some of our other asbestos wonders." As you follow him through the house, he points out asbestos applications with the pride of a museum curator showcasing rare treasures. Asbestos ceiling tiles in the library, asbestos linings in the fireplace, asbestos mats under hot dishes on the dining room table, and here, he says, opening a cupboard in the kitchen, asbestos gloves for handling hot pots and pans. He pulls out what look like crude oven mitts, grey-white and stiff. Cook uses these every day. No more burned fingers. No, you think grimly, just scarred lungs and eventual cancer. And upstairs, Mr. Harrington continues, we have asbestos insulation around all the electrical wiring, prevents fires from short circuits, you know. The tragic irony is that asbestos was genuinely effective at preventing fires, one of the leading causes of death in Edwardian homes. In trying to protect themselves from an immediate danger they could see and understand, families like the Harringtons were exposing themselves to a far more insidious threat they couldn't comprehend. As you pass the servants' quarters, you notice Jenkins sitting on a narrow bed, still coughing. A young maid is bringing him a glass of water. "Perhaps Jenkins should see a doctor," you suggest to Mr. Harrington. "That cough sounds serious." Mr. Harrington glances dismissively at the worker. Workers are always coughing. It's the nature of their occupation. Dust, fumes, all sorts of things they encounter, part of their lot in life, I'm afraid. This callous attitude toward worker health was typical of the era. The wealthy rarely connected the dots between the materials in their homes and the illnesses of those who installed them. Even when the connection was pointed out, profit and convenience usually won out over safety concerns. When you return to the main part of the house, you find Mrs. Harrington in the drawing room with a catalogue open on her lap. "Look at this," she says excitedly, pointing to an advertisement. "Asbestos table linens, completely washable and fireproof. We simply must order some for the dinner party next week." You peer at the advertisement, which shows a smiling woman in Edwardian dress, proudly displaying a tablecloth. "Modern protection for the modern home," the headline proclaims. Below, in smaller text, "Woven with 40% genuine asbestos fibres for unparalleled safety and durability." "And look here," Mrs. Harrington continues, turning the page. "Asbestos baby blankets keep your little one warm and safe from fire hazards. Wouldn't that be perfect for my niece?" A chill runs through you at the thought of an infant wrapped in asbestos fibres, breathing them in with every tiny breath. But what can you say? In 1905, nobody knows what you know. The dangers of asbestos won't be widely recognised for decades. It says here they even make asbestos Christmas decorations, Mrs. Harrington reads from the catalogue. "Artificial snow made from pure white asbestos fibres. Sprinkle liberally on your Christmas tree for a winter wonderland effect that's completely fireproof." You imagine an Edwardian family gathered around their Christmas tree, children playing beneath branches dusted with pure asbestos, tiny fibres drifting down onto their upturned faces as they admire the decorations. It's a scene repeated in countless homes, year after year, for decades. The doorbell rings, interrupting this nightmare vision. A moment later, James announces the arrival of Dr. Morris, the family physician. "Ah, right on time," Mr. Harrington says. "I asked Dr. Morris to stop by and check on Jenkins, just to set your mind at ease," he adds with a wink to you. Dr. Morris is a portly, bewhiskered man with the confident manner of someone rarely contradicted. He greets the Harringtons warmly before being led to the servants' quarters to examine the ailing worker. While he's gone, Mrs. Harrington returns to her catalogue, circling items for future purchase. Asbestos theatre curtains, asbestos ironing board covers, oh, and look, asbestos toothpaste for a polished smile that resists heat and decay. How clever. You suppress a groan, wondering if there's anything the Edwardians won't add asbestos to. The answer, you know from history, is no. The miracle mineral found its way into thousands of products, from cigarette filters to talcum powder to the fake snow used in The Wizard of Oz. Dr. Morris returns looking grave. "The man should rest for a few days," he informs Mr. Harrington. "His lungs sound quite congested." "What's the diagnosis?" Mr. Harrington asks. "Early pneumoconiosis, I suspect," the doctor replies. "Dust in the lungs, common among miners, stonemasons, and increasingly, I find, among those who work with asbestos." Mr. Harrington frowns. "You're not suggesting the asbestos is causing his condition?" Dr. Morris hesitates, clearly unwilling to directly contradict his wealthy patient. There have been some observations in medical journals, nothing conclusive of course, but there are reports of lung disease among asbestos workers dating back to Roman times. "Roman times!" Mr. Harrington scoffs. "Next you'll be telling me the Romans had automobiles." No, it's much more likely poor Jenkins has the consumption, or perhaps he smokes too much." The doctor nods, unwilling to press the point. "Quite possibly. In any case, rest is prescribed, and perhaps a different assignment when he returns to work, something less dusty." After the doctor leaves, Mr. Harrington dismisses the incident entirely. Doctors see problems everywhere these days, always inventing new diseases with fancy names. In my father's time, there were only about 5 illnesses a person could get, and most of them were cured by fresh air and whiskey. But if there's a chance the asbestos is dangerous, you venture carefully, mightn't it be prudent to take some precautions? Perhaps the workers could wear masks. Mr. Harrington laughs. Masks? They'd look ridiculous. Besides, asbestos has been used for thousands of years. The Romans wove it into their tablecloths. If it were dangerous, don't you think someone would have noticed by now? This was the core of the problem. The lag time between asbestos exposure and disease development, often 20 to 50 years, made it nearly impossible for people to connect cause and effect. Workers might handle asbestos for decades before developing symptoms, by which time they'd been exposed to countless other potential hazards. The few doctors who did raise alarms were largely ignored or dismissed, their concerns buried under the weight of industry propaganda and genuine enthusiasm for a material that seemed to solve so many problems. Young Henry bounds into the room, interrupting your thoughts. "Father, the men are making snowballs in the nursery. May I play too?" "Snowballs?" Mrs. Harrington repeats, confused. "In June?" "Not real snow, dear," Mr. Harrington explains. "They're probably rolling up excess asbestos for disposal." "No, Henry, that's not for playing. It's building material." The boy looks disappointed, but accepts this explanation. As he leaves, you notice white dust on his hands and clothes from merely being in the vicinity of the renovation work. "Should Henry be going near the construction area at all?" you ask, trying to keep your voice casual. "The dust gets everywhere." Mrs. Harrington looks momentarily concerned. "I hadn't thought of that. The dust does make rather a mess. Perhaps we should keep him away until the work is complete, just to keep his clothes clean." "An excellent idea," you agree, relieved to have found a way to protect the boy, even if it's for the wrong reasons. After lunch, the family decides to take a drive in their new automobile, a welcome respite from the asbestos-filled house. As you're preparing to leave, one of the maids approaches Mrs. Harrington timidly, begging your pardon, ma'am, but I was wondering if we might open some windows while cleaning today. The dust from the nursery work is settling everywhere, and it's ever so difficult to breathe while dusting. Mrs. Harrington considers this. I suppose that would be acceptable, as long as you close them before we return. We don't want the house cooling down. Thank you, ma'am, the maid says, curtsying. As she turns to leave, you notice her handkerchief has the same faint blood spots as Jenkins did. The automobile ride is pleasantly uneventful compared to the hazards of the house. When you return in the late afternoon, the workers have finished in the nursery and departed, all except Jenkins, who remains in the servants' quarters still coughing. Mr. Harrington leads you proudly to inspect the completed work. The nursery walls now gleam with a smooth, pale coating of asbestos plaster. The ceiling features asbestos tiles in a decorative pattern. Even the floor has been laid with asbestos-containing linoleum. Completely fireproof, Mr. Harrington declares proudly. My niece will be the safest baby in London. You say nothing, knowing that this safe nursery is actually a death trap of a different kind. Not an immediate danger, perhaps, but a ticking time bomb of microscopic fibres that will be released with every disturbance, every time the door slams and vibrates the walls, every footstep on the floor, every cleaning of the surfaces. As you're leaving the nursery, you pass a maid dusting the hallway. She's using a feather duster on a decorative shelf, sending up small clouds of dust with each sweep. Some of it is ordinary household dust, but some of it, contains the invisible killers from the construction work. Perhaps a damp cloth would be more effective, you suggest gently. The maid looks surprised at being addressed directly. Oh, the mistress prefers the feather duster for the delicate items, sir, says wet cloths can damage the finishes. Another small tragedy in the making. The feather duster doesn't remove dust, it just redistributes it into the air where it can be inhaled. At dinner that evening, served on the table with its asbestos heat mats, Mrs. Harrington shares exciting news. I've ordered those asbestos tablecloths and napkins, she announces. They should arrive next week, just in time for the dinner party. And the salesman suggested the most wonderful thing, asbestos clothing. Clothing, you repeat, fork pausing halfway to your mouth. Yes! They're making undergarments with asbestos woven into the fabric. Completely fireproof. After that terrible incident with Lady Westerham's dress catching fire at the opera, I think it's a marvellous precaution. Mr. Harrington nods approvingly. Very sensible, my dear. With all these new electric and gas appliances, one can't be too careful about fire hazards. The irony is suffocating. In their quest to protect themselves from the very real danger of fire, the Harringtons are surrounding themselves with a far deadlier hazard. After dinner, you join Mr. Harrington in the library for brandy. As he pours the drinks, you notice his cigarette case on the table, emblazoned with the logo of a popular brand that you happen to know from your historical knowledge used asbestos in their filters. I've been meaning to ask, Mr. Harrington says, handing you a glass. What do you think of all our modern improvements? Quite impressive, aren't they? You choose your words carefully. They're certainly innovative, though I sometimes wonder if the rush to adopt new materials and technologies might occasionally outpace our understanding of their effects. Mr. Harrington laughs. A philosopher, eh? Well, I suppose there's always some risk with progress. Can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. What? But just look at how much safer and more comfortable our homes are now than in our grandparents' day. Safer in some ways, perhaps. The risk of fire, a terrifying and immediate danger in an era of open flames and flammable building materials, was genuinely reduced by asbestos. But at what cost? Later that night, as you prepare for bed, you notice something on your nightstand that wasn't there before. A small gift box with a card from Mrs. Harrington. Inside is a pair of sleeping gloves lined with, what else? Asbestos. For toasty, warm hands on cold nights, the card reads, the very latest in fireproof comfort. You place the gloves carefully back in their box, unwilling to touch them more than necessary. Then you open your window wide, despite the evening chill, and take several deep breaths of the relatively clean London air. In your comfortable bed at home, you don't have to worry about invisible killers lurking in your walls, your floors, your ceiling. But in this Edwardian house, they're everywhere, woven into the fabric of daily life, celebrated as miracles of modern science, invited in with open arms by families who have no idea what they're really bringing home. And the saddest part, the full tragedy of asbestos won't become apparent for decades. Many of the people filling their homes with the miracle mineral in 1905 won't live to see its dangers fully revealed, but their children will, those babies in asbestos-lined nurseries. Wrapped in asbestos blankets, breathing asbestos dust with every breath, they'll discover the truth in the hardest possible way. As you drift off to sleep, you can still hear Jenkins coughing in the servants' quarters, a ghostly reminder of the hidden killer that has already claimed its first victim in this house, the first of many, though the Harringtons will likely never make the connection. Tomorrow will bring new wonders and new hazards in this Edwardian home, but for now, with your window open to the night air, you can at least breathe easily, even as you wonder what other invisible dangers might be lurking in the marvellous modern conveniences all around you. The next morning you're awakened by excited female voices drifting up from downstairs. Glancing at the small clock on your bedside table, you see it's barely 9, early for social calls in Edwardian London. You dress quickly, curious about the commotion. As you descend the grand staircase, the voices grow louder, punctuated by delighted laughter and exclamations. Following the sound to the drawing room, you find Mrs. Harrington surrounded by 3 elegantly dressed women, all fawning over what appears to be a collection of ornate bottles and boxes spread across a table. "Ah, there you are," Mrs. Harrington calls when she spots you. "Come meet my friends. We're having a little beauty demonstration this morning." The women turn to look at you with identical porcelain white faces, their eyes unnaturally bright, lips stained an artificial red. There's something unsettling about their appearance, a uniformity that borders on the uncanny. Each woman's skin has the same deathly pallor, the same painted doll quality. "Ladies, this is our house guest," Mrs. Harrington says, "and these are my dearest friends, Lady Pembroke, whom you've met, Mrs. Alcott, and Miss Fairchild." You bow politely, trying not to stare at their ghostly complexions. Unlike your time, where tanned skin is often considered healthy and attractive, these Edwardian women have deliberately made themselves look almost corpse-like. "We're sampling the latest beauty preparations from Paris," Mrs. Harrington explains, gesturing to the array of products on the table. Madame Delacroix has sent her assistant to demonstrate them. The assistant is a striking Frenchwoman in her 30s, elegantly dressed in black, with the same artificially white complexion as the others. She smiles at you briefly before returning her attention to unpacking more products from a large case. "Madam says these are the exact same preparations used by the Empress of Russia," the assistant explains in accented English, "guaranteed to preserve youth and beauty for decades. What they're actually guaranteed to do, is poison anyone who uses them." But looking at the rapt expressions on the women's faces, you realise they have no idea of the dangers lurking in those pretty bottles and jars. "This," the French assistant says, holding up a small blue glass jar, "is our famous crème céleste. It creates the perfect lily-white complexion that is so fashionable." She opens the jar, revealing a thick white cream. A subtle metallic odour reaches your nostrils, making you step back instinctively. You recognise that smell from history books. Lead. "May I?" Mrs. Alcott asks eagerly, already dipping her fingers into the jar. "But of course," the assistant smiles. "Apply it generously. The effect is more dramatic with a thick application." Mrs. Alcott scoops a large dollop of the white cream and begins slathering it onto her already pale face. "It tingles," she exclaims. "That means it's working, yes?" "Indeed," the assistant confirms. "That is the special ingredient activating." The special ingredient is almost certainly lead carbonate, white lead, one of the most popular skin whiteners of the era, and a cumulative poison that would slowly damage the nervous system, cause abdominal pain, and eventually lead to paralysis and death. "I've been using Madame's preparations for 3 months now," Lady Pembroke confides to you in a low voice. "My husband says I look 10 years younger, though I have been experiencing the strangest headaches lately." Headaches, you know, are one of the first symptoms of lead poisoning. Looking more closely at Lady Pembroke, you notice a slight tremor in her hands, another telling sign. "And this," the assistant continues, holding up a small paper box, "is our newest product, arsenic complexion wafers. Your blood runs cold at the casual mention of arsenic, one of history's most notorious poisons, being marketed as a beauty aid." "Arsenic?" you can't help blurting out. "Isn't that dangerous?" The women look at you with surprise, then break into amused laughter. "Oh, how sweet of you to be concerned," Mrs. Harrington says, patting your arm. "But these are perfectly safe. Many health tonics contain arsenic. It's extremely beneficial in small doses." The French assistant nods confidently. "Absolutely safe when used as directed. 1 wafer per day, dissolved in water or placed directly on the tongue. They purify the blood and create the most magnificent pallor." She opens the box to reveal small white wafers that look disturbingly like communion hosts or after-dinner mints. Miss Fairchild, the youngest of the women, takes one immediately and pops it into her mouth. "They taste quite pleasant," she says, "just a bit sweet with a slightly bitter aftertaste." That aftertaste is literally poison. Arsenic, once ingested, will begin to disrupt cellular functions throughout her body. With regular use, it will build up in her system, causing a range of symptoms from hair loss to skin lesions to eventual organ failure. "The results are truly remarkable," the assistant continues, turning to a portable mirror on the table. "Observe my own complexion, achieved entirely with Madame's products." The women gather around, admiring the assistant's unnaturally white skin. None of them realise that this ideal complexion is actually a symptom of chronic poisoning, the arsenic destroying red blood cells, creating a ghostly pallor that was, ironically, considered the height of beauty. "Now, for the eyes," the assistant announces, producing a small dropper bottle filled with clear liquid. "Our Bright Eyes solution, just 1 drop in each eye, creates a luminous, dewy appearance most men find irresistible." You recognise this as belladonna, deadly nightshade, which dilates the pupils to create an appearance of wide-eyed innocence or arousal. While occasionally used medicinally in extremely controlled doses, the casual use of belladonna as a beauty aid was incredibly dangerous, often leading to vision problems and even blindness. "I simply cannot go to the opera without my eye drops," Lady Pembroke declares. "The gentlemen are so much more attentive when one has bright, expressive eyes." "May I?" Mrs. Alcott asks, reaching for the bottle. The assistant nods, handing her the dropper. Mrs. Alcott tilts her head back, pulls down her lower eyelid, and places a drop in each eye. She blinks rapidly, her face contorting momentarily in discomfort. "It stings quite a bit," she admits. "But beauty requires some sacrifice, doesn't it, ladies?" The other women murmur in agreement. This casual acceptance of pain as part of beauty routines was deeply ingrained in Edwardian culture, and to some extent continues in your own time, though with far less lethal products. "My cousin uses lemon juice instead of belladonna," Miss Fairchild mentions. "She says it works nearly as well and doesn't cause those troublesome headaches." "Or lemon juice?" Mrs. Harrington scoffs. "How provincial, one might as well use kitchen scraps as beauty aids. No, Madame's preparations are the finest in Europe. Royal families use them exclusively." The assistant beams at this endorsement and continues her demonstration. "Next, we have our Rouge Impérial. Unlike common rouge, ours contains a special ingredient that bonds with the skin for a natural, lasting flush. That special ingredient, you strongly suspect, is mercuric sulfide vermilion, a bright red mercury compound used in expensive cosmetics. Like lead and arsenic, mercury is a cumulative poison that would slowly destroy the user's nervous system, leading to tremors, memory loss, and eventually insanity. As the beauty demonstration continues, you notice young Henry peering around the doorframe, watching the proceedings with wide-eyed fascination. The boy slips into the room unnoticed by the women and begins examining the colourful array of products on a side table. "Henry," you call softly, hurrying over to him. "You shouldn't touch those." "Why not?" he asks innocently. "They smell nice, and look at the pretty colours." You gently guide him away from the table. "Those are for ladies only," you explain, not wanting to frighten him with the truth. "Why don't you go see what your father is doing?" "He's in his study with boring papers," Henry pouts. "I wanted to see what's making everyone laugh in here." "Henry," Mrs. Harrington exclaims, finally noticing her son. "You shouldn't be in here. Run along and find your governess." The boy reluctantly leaves, but not before casting a longing glance at the colourful bottles and jars. You make a mental note to ensure the beauty products are stored safely away from curious children, though in truth they're not safe for anyone to use. As Henry departs, the assistant produces her pièce de résistance, an elegant crystal bottle filled with pink liquid. "This," she announces with reverence, "is Madame's eternal jeunesse, eternal youth, our most exclusive preparation containing a special radium extract that energizes the skin cells from within." Your heart sinks. Radium, possibly the most dangerous substance in the Edwardian beauty arsenal, and one they knew even less about than lead, arsenic, or mercury. "Radium?" Miss Fairchild asks, sounding impressed but uncertain. "Isn't that the glowing substance discovered by Madame Curie?" "The very same," the assistant confirms proudly. "The most advanced scientific discovery of our age, now harnessed for beauty. It literally brings light and energy to the complexion from within." She doesn't mention, of course, that radium is highly radioactive and will cause radiation burns, hair loss, anemia, bone cancer, and eventually death. The Edwardian fascination with radium, which would continue for decades, was one of the most tragic examples of embracing a new substance without understanding its dangers. "It's terribly expensive," Mrs. Harrington explains to her friends, "but worth every penny. I've been using it for a month now, and I'm certain my complexion has improved dramatically. Thomas even commented on my glow last week." The tragic irony is that she probably was glowing, literally, as the radium destroyed her skin cells and DNA. The application must be precise, the assistant explains, demonstrating by dabbing the pink liquid onto Mrs. Harrington's cheeks. A small amount each morning and evening, massaged gently into the skin. Never apply near the eyes or mouth. This caution, isn't because they understand radium is dangerous, but simply because the preparation might irritate sensitive areas. They have no concept of the true radioactive hazard they're handling. "How long does a bottle last?" Lady Pembroke asks, examining the crystal container with naked envy. "With proper use, approximately 2 months," the assistant replies, though many of our clients report that they begin to see results after just 2 weeks, and often use it more frequently thereafter. More frequent use would only hasten the horrific effects: radiation burns that wouldn't heal, hair falling out in clumps, teeth loosening in gums, bones that would literally crumble from within. But these effects might take months or years to become apparent, by which time the damage would be irreversible. "I simply must have some," Lady Pembroke declares, opening her purse. "How much is it?" The price the assistant quotes would be equivalent to several months' wages for a servant, but Lady Pembroke doesn't blink, counting out the money immediately. The other women follow suit, eagerly purchasing their own bottles of the radioactive elixir. "Now, ladies," the assistant says once the sales are complete, "shall we move on to hair care? Madame has developed a remarkable new treatment for creating those lustrous curls that are so fashionable this season." The women follow her to another table where an alarming contraption awaits, an early version of a permanent wave machine. The metal device resembles a medieval torture instrument more than a beauty tool, with dozens of metal clamps and rods connected to an electrical unit. "Madame's electric permanent wave," the assistant announces proudly. "It creates perfect, lasting curls using the modern miracle of electricity combined with our special chemical solution." You recognize this as one of the most dangerous beauty devices of the era. Early permanent wave machines used a combination of strong chemicals and electrical heating elements that frequently caused severe burns to both hair and scalp. Some even used asbestos pads as part of the process, adding another deadly element to the mix. "I had my hair done with a similar machine last month," Miss Fairchild confides to you. "It took 6 hours and was dreadfully uncomfortable, but the results were worth it, don't you think?" She turns to show you her elaborately curled hair. Looking closely, you can see patches where the hair appears damaged and brittle, and a small area near her temple where it seems to have broken off entirely. Or very impressive, you manage, wondering how much of her hair will survive a few more such treatments. "Who would like to volunteer?" the assistant asks, gesturing to the menacing machine. Mrs. Alcott steps forward eagerly. "I would. My husband adores curls, but my hair is so stubbornly straight." "Excellent. Please sit here." Mrs. Alcott settles into the chair while the assistant begins applying a strong-smelling chemical solution to sections of her hair. "This may tingle a bit," the assistant warns as she works. "That's perfectly normal, just the solution activating the hair follicles. The tingle is actually the caustic chemicals beginning to break down the protein structure of Mrs. Alcott's hair and burning her scalp in the process." But she sits stoically, accepting the discomfort as the price of beauty. Once all of Mrs. Alcott's hair has been saturated with the chemical solution, the assistant begins attaching the metal clamps, winding sections of hair around them tightly. "Now we apply the heat," she explains, connecting the clamps to the electrical unit. "This is what sets the curl permanently." She flips a switch, and the machine hums to life. The smell intensifies, a noxious combination of chemicals, heated metal, and, most disturbingly, burning hair. Mrs. Alcott winces but remains seated. "Is it supposed to feel so hot?" she asks nervously. "A certain amount of heat is necessary," the assistant assures her, "but do let me know if it becomes too uncomfortable." Too uncomfortable is an understatement. These early permanent wave machines frequently reached temperatures that caused third-degree burns. Women endured excruciating pain in these contraptions, often emerging with damaged hair, blistered scalps, and in some cases patchy baldness that never resolved. While the permanent wave process continues, the assistant turns her attention back to the others. "While we wait, shall we discuss eyebrow and eyelash enhancement? Madame has developed a special growth serum containing a mercury compound that stimulates the follicles remarkably well." More mercury, this time to be applied directly near the eyes, where it could be absorbed even more readily into the bloodstream and eventually the brain. The Edwardian beauty routine was essentially a full-body poisoning regimen, with toxic substances applied to every feature. "I found that singeing the ends of the eyelashes with a hot needle helps them grow back thicker," Lady Pembroke offers. "My lady's maid does it for me weekly." The other women nod in appreciation of this tip, completely unfazed by the idea of holding hot metal near their eyes. The casual acceptance of pain and danger in the name of beauty is chilling. Suddenly, Mrs. Alcott gives a sharp cry. "It's burning me, I can feel it burning." The assistant rushes to the permanent wave machine and quickly switches it off. "Let me check, madame." She examines Mrs. Alcott's scalp, where the metal clamps have been attached. Even from where you stand, you can see angry red marks forming. "Just a slight irritation," the assistant says dismissively. "Quite normal. We'll apply Madame's special soothing cream afterward, and you'll feel no discomfort by evening." Mrs. Alcott doesn't look convinced, but allows the process to continue after the assistant adjusts the clamps. The smell of burning hair intensifies. "Perhaps we should open a window," you suggest, finding it increasingly difficult to breathe in the chemical-laden air. "Oh no," the assistant objects immediately. "Drafts will cool the machine and ruin the curl pattern. We must keep the room warm." So the toxic fumes continue to build in the closed room, while Mrs. Alcott's scalp slowly cooks beneath the metal contraption. The other women seem completely untroubled, eagerly examining the other products on display. "What's this one?" Mrs. Harrington asks, picking up a small pot labelled Lip Rouge Lumineux. "Ah, our newest lip colour," the assistant explains. "It contains a small amount of radium for a subtle illumination effect. The gentlemen find it most alluring, especially in gaslight." Radioactive lipstick designed to be applied to the mouth, where the radium could be directly ingested with every lick of the lips, every sip of tea, every bite of food. The cavalier use of radium in cosmetics would later be recognized as one of the most dangerous beauty trends in history. "I simply must try it," Mrs. Harrington declares, opening the pot to reveal a bright red paste. She applies it generously to her lips, then turns to model the effect for her friends. "How does it look?" "Divine," Miss Fairchild exclaims. "Your lips appear to be glowing from within," and they literally are, emitting alpha radiation that will eventually destroy the tissue of her lips, gums, and tongue. After an hour, Mrs. Alcott's permanent wave is finally complete. The assistant removes the clamps to reveal tight, artificial-looking curls. Parts of Mrs. Alcott's scalp are visibly red and beginning to blister, but she seems delighted with the results. "Oh, it's exactly what I wanted," she exclaims, patting the stiff curls carefully. "Herbert will be so pleased. Remember to use Madame's special hair tonic daily to maintain the effect," the assistant instructs, producing yet another bottle, this one containing a greenish liquid. Just a small amount massaged into the scalp morning and night. You peer at the bottle's label, which lists among its ingredients mercuric chloride and lead acetate, more poisons to be regularly applied to an already damaged scalp. As the beauty demonstration concludes, the women gather their purchases, an arsenal of toxic products they'll apply to their bodies daily in pursuit of an ideal that is, ironically, the physical manifestation of poisoning. Shall we all meet next week to compare results? Mrs. Harrington suggests as she shows her friends out. I'm particularly excited to see how the radium cream works for everyone. The women agree enthusiastically, completely unaware that they're essentially comparing notes on the progression of their self-poisoning. After they've gone, Mrs. Harrington returns to the drawing room, her face glowing with more than just radium. Wasn't that fascinating? The marvels of modern science, all dedicated to enhancing feminine beauty. Very educational, you reply carefully, though some of those products seemed rather harsh. Beauty requires sacrifice, Mrs. Harrington says dismissively, examining her newly rouged lips in a small hand mirror. My grandmother used to pinch her cheeks until they bled to get a natural flush before parties. At least we have scientific preparations now. Scientific, yes. Safe, decidedly not. But how can you explain to her that the elegant bottles and jars she's so proud of are filled with poisons that will slowly destroy her health, that the beautiful glow she's achieving is actually radiation damage, that the fashionable pallor she and her friends covet is a symptom of blood disorders caused by heavy metal poisoning? As you watch Mrs. Harrington carefully arrange her new beauty products on her dressing table, you can't help but think of the countless women throughout the Edwardian era who unknowingly poisoned themselves in the name of beauty. Sophisticated, educated women who believed they were embracing the height of modernity and science when they were actually participating in a slow, collective self-poisoning. And the saddest part? Many of them would never make the connection between their mysterious ailments, the headaches, tremors, vision problems, and worse, and the beauty routines they followed so faithfully. The delayed onset of symptoms, the gradual accumulation of toxins, the variable rates at which different women would be affected, all made it nearly impossible for Edwardians to recognize the true source of these feminine complaints. Later that evening, as you pass Mrs. Harrington's room, you notice her seated at her dressing table, carefully applying the radium cream to her face by gaslight. In the dim light, her skin seems to have an unnatural glow, beautiful by Edwardian standards, terrifying to your modern eyes. She catches sight of you in the mirror and smiles. Just preparing for dinner, she explains. One must look one's best, even for a family meal. You nod and continue down the hall, wondering how many more toxic enhancements she'll apply before considering herself presentable. The powders, creams, and colours that Edwardian women layered onto their skin created an almost impenetrable barrier of poison, lead, mercury, arsenic, and radium, all working together to slowly destroy the very beauty they were meant to enhance. In your own time, beauty products are regulated, tested, their ingredients scrutinized for safety, but in this Edwardian house, the dressing table is as dangerous as the electrical wiring or the asbestos walls, perhaps more so because its hazards are deliberately applied day after day in the name of beauty. And the worst part? Unlike the electrical fire that might or might not happen, unlike the asbestos that might or might not cause disease decades later, these beauty toxins are guaranteed poisons, their damage certain and cumulative. Every application brings these Edwardian women one step closer to illness, disfigurement, and potentially death. As you prepare for dinner, you notice a small jar of the radium cream has been placed on your own dressing table, a thoughtful gift from Mrs. Harrington, no doubt. You carefully put the jar aside, unwilling to even touch it. In this elegant Edwardian home, even generosity can be deadly. The cosmetics may be the most beautiful killers yet, disguised as the very essence of sophistication and refinement. And unlike the electrical dangers or the asbestos, these poisons are eagerly welcomed, applied with loving care, their effects mistaken for the very beauty they will eventually destroy. The next evening, the Harrington household is abuzz with preparations for their dinner party. Servants scurry through hallways carrying polished silver, fresh-cut flowers and the new asbestos tablecloth Mrs. Harrington had ordered. But it's what Mr. Harrington is proudly displaying in his study that has drawn a small crowd of early arriving guests. "Isn't it marvellous," he says, dimming the electric lights to enhance the effect. "The very cutting edge of science." You approach cautiously, already suspecting what you'll find. In the centre of his desk sits a small glass case containing what appears to be a pocket watch, but this is no ordinary timepiece. Even in the dimmed room, the watch dial glows with an eerie, mesmerising blue-green light. "Genuine radium paint on the dial and hands," Mr. Harrington explains, his face illuminated from below by the watch's ghostly glow. Completely self-illuminating. No need for matches or electricity to tell the time at night. The assembled guests murmur appreciatively, leaning closer to the glowing object. One man reaches out, clearly wanting to touch it. "May I?" he asks. "Certainly." Mr. Harrington removes the watch from its case and passes it to him. "Feel how light it is, and the glow will last for years, they say. Decades even." The watch moves from hand to hand around the circle, each guest marvelling at its unearthly light. You alone hang back, knowing what they don't, that the beautiful glow comes from deadly radiation being emitted by the radium paint. Every person handling that watch is receiving a dose of radiation, their skin absorbing alpha particles that will damage cells and DNA. "They're putting this luminous paint on all sorts of things now," Mr. Harrington continues enthusiastically. "Clock faces, military equipment, even children's toys." "Children's toys," you repeat, unable to hide your alarm. "Oh yes, my nephew has a marvellous toy soldier set with glowing swords and shields. The boy plays with them under his bed covers at night, says it's like having captured stars." What he's actually captured is radioactive poison that his nephew is handling directly, sleeping beside, probably even putting in his mouth as children often do with toys. Your stomach turns at the thought. "The paint is rather expensive," one gentleman comments, reluctantly passing the watch to the next admirer. "But I understand they're finding more applications for radium every day. Medical uses, I believe?" "Indeed," Mr. Harrington nods enthusiastically. "They're using radium to treat all manner of conditions: cancer, arthritis, gout, even impotence. A friend of mine takes radium tablets daily for his digestion. Says they've done wonders." Radium tablets. You've read about these in history books, literal radioactive poisons sold as health supplements, consuming people from the inside. The human experimentation of the Edwardian era happened not in secret laboratories, but in ordinary homes with willing participants who believed they were embracing modern medical miracles. "My wife has been using a radium beauty cream," another man offers. "Makes her skin positively glow, I must say." "As has Mrs. Harrington," your host confirms proudly, "though I've had to insist she store it properly. Found the maid using it on her hands yesterday. Had to explain it's far too expensive for servant use. His concern is the cost, not the danger. Though in truth, the maid is probably fortunate to be denied regular exposure to the radioactive cream." The conversation shifts as more guests arrive, but the glowing watch remains on display, casting its sinister light across the room. Later, at dinner, you notice Mrs. Harrington's new asbestos tablecloth providing a pristine white backdrop for the formal place settings. She's paired it with her new radium-infused lipstick, which catches the light oddly when she speaks, giving her mouth an unnatural luminescence. "My dear," a woman seated across from you addresses Mrs. Harrington, "you must tell me where you got that lipstick. There's something positively magnetic about it." Mrs. Harrington touches her lips lightly, pleased at the attention. "Isn't it divine? It contains radium, that new element everyone's talking about, the same substance that makes Thomas's new watch glow in the dark." "Radium? On your lips?" The woman's eyes widen with interest, not alarm. "Is it quite safe?" "Oh, absolutely," Mrs. Harrington assures her. "It's the most scientific preparation. They're using radium in health tonics now, you know. If it's safe to drink, it's certainly safe for cosmetics. But it's not safe to drink. It's not safe to wear. It's not safe to handle or even be near." The radium she's so casually applying to her lips is being ingested with every bite of food, every sip of wine. It will settle in her bones like calcium, irradiating her from within for the rest of her life. The dinner conversation flows around topics both mundane and horrifying: the latest fashions in radioactive jewellery, the new practice of drinking radium-infused water for health, the remarkable glow-in-the-dark paint being used for household objects. "I've ordered luminous numbers for our front door," one man announces proudly. "No more fumbling with keys in the dark." "The military is using it for watch dials and compass faces," another adds. "Imagine being able to navigate at night without giving away your position with a lamp." No one mentions the factory workers, mostly young women, who are painting these dials with radioactive paint, licking their brushes to create a fine point and in the process ingesting lethal amounts of radium. The radium girls, as they'll later be known, whose bodies will break down in the most horrific ways, their jawbones disintegrating, their teeth falling out, their bones literally glowing in the dark as the radium replaces the calcium in their skeletons. After dinner, the party moves to the drawing room, where Mr. Harrington has another surprise awaiting his guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announces with theatrical flair, "I've procured something quite extraordinary for your entertainment tonight." He unveils a small wooden box with a hand crank on one side. The latest scientific marvel, a genuine radium emanator. Your blood runs cold. You've read about these devices, emanators or revigators, that were designed to infuse water with radon gas, the radioactive decay product of radium. Simply fill the reservoir with water, Mr. Harrington demonstrates. Let it sit overnight near the radium source inside, and by morning you have health-giving radioactive water, the latest treatment from the spas of Europe, now available in your own home. A servant brings a tray of small glasses and Mr. Harrington begins dispensing the water from a tap on the emanator. "This was prepared earlier today," he explains, "best consumed immediately while the emanations are still potent." To your horror, the guests eagerly accept the glasses, sipping the radioactive water with expressions of delight and wonder. "It tingles on the tongue," one woman exclaims. "How extraordinary." "They say it invigorates the entire system," Mr. Harrington says, taking a generous sip from his own glass. "Radiates health and vitality from within." An apt choice of words, though not in the way he imagines. The water is literally radiating, dosing each guest with radioactive particles that will spread throughout their bodies, damaging tissue and DNA as they go. You politely decline when offered a glass, earning a disappointed look from your host. "Not joining us in a toast to modern science?" he asks. "I have a sensitive stomach," you improvise. "I shouldn't drink anything unusual before bed." Mr. Harrington shrugs and moves on to the next guest. As the evening progresses, you notice young Henry has slipped into the room and is watching the proceedings with wide-eyed fascination. He approaches his father's radium watch, still on display, reaching out a small hand toward its hypnotic glow. "Henry," you call softly, crossing the room quickly. Perhaps it's past your bedtime. The boy looks disappointed, but doesn't argue. As you guide him toward the door, he asks, "Why does father's new watch glow like that? Is it magic?" "Not magic," you tell him gently. "It's science, but not everything scientific is good for children to play with. Some new inventions need to be treated with great care." Henry nods solemnly, though you doubt he fully understands. How could he? Even the adults in the room, educated, wealthy, supposedly sophisticated people, don't understand the dangers of the radium they're so casually consuming, wearing, and displaying in their homes. As you escort Henry back to the nursery, you pass a maid coming down the hallway. She's young, barely 20, with a haunted look that gives you pause. "Are you all right?" you ask quietly. She seems startled that you've addressed her directly. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." But as she turns to continue her duties, you notice something disturbing. Her fingers are bandaged with what appears to be burns visible at the edges of the dressings. "What happened to your hands?" you ask gently. She glances down, then quickly tucks her hands into her apron pockets. "Nothing serious, sir. Just a small accident in the kitchen." But you suspect the truth is far worse. "Were you cleaning Mr. Harrington's new watch collection by any chance?" Her eyes widen slightly, confirming your suspicion. "How did you know, sir?" "Just a guess," you say. "Those glowing dials, they can cause burns if handled too much." "The housekeeper said I was being careless," she whispers, "that I must have gotten something caustic on my hands, but I only touched those watches, cleaned them each morning for a week I did. Then my fingers started to blister and peel. This poor maid is experiencing radiation burns, the same fate that awaits the factory workers painting the dials, though they'll suffer far worse effects from their more intensive exposure." "You should ask to be assigned different duties," you suggest, "perhaps something that doesn't involve handling those new glowing items." She nods uncertainly. "I'll try, sir, though it's not my place to question assignments." After settling Henry in the nursery, which you note with dismay now features glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, undoubtedly painted with the same radioactive material, you return to the party. The guests are now passing around another of Mr. Harrington's radium curiosities, a small vial of what appears to be fine sand. "Genuine radium bromide," he explains proudly. "Terribly expensive, but fascinating, isn't it? Just a few grains mixed with zinc sulfide creates that remarkable phosphorescence." The guests peer at the vial in awe, completely unaware that they're looking at one of the most dangerous substances they could possibly have in a drawing room. If that vial were to break, the fine radioactive powder would disperse throughout the room, being inhaled and ingested by everyone present, contaminating the house for years to come. "Where did you acquire such a thing?" one man asks, clearly envious. "I have connections in scientific circles," Mr. Harrington says vaguely, clearly enjoying his status as the owner of such a rare and expensive curiosity. "It's part of my new collection of radioactive minerals. I'm having a special display cabinet built, glass-fronted with electric lighting to show them off properly. You'll be the envy of the Royal Society," another guest comments. "I hear radium sells for more than £1,000 per gram." "Worth every penny," Mr. Harrington declares. "It's the element of the future. They're already finding new applications every day. Medical treatments, industrial uses, consumer products. The possibilities are endless." The possibilities for harm are indeed endless, you think grimly. Unlike electricity, which can at least be switched off, unlike asbestos, which is dangerous primarily when disturbed, radium represents a constant, unrelenting source of radiation that cannot be neutralized or contained by any method available in the Edwardian era. As the evening draws to a close and guests begin to depart, you notice Mrs. Harrington looking unwell. Her face is flushed and she keeps dabbing at her lips with a handkerchief. "Are you feeling all right?" you ask her quietly. "Just a slight burning sensation," she admits, touching her radioactive lipstick gingerly. "The salesgirl said it might cause a stimulating tingle as it activates the skin, though I must say it's rather more uncomfortable than I expected." What she's experiencing are the first signs of radiation burns from the radium in her lipstick. The delicate tissue of her lips is already being damaged at the cellular level. "Perhaps you should remove it," you suggest, "if it's causing discomfort." She looks scandalized. "In the middle of a party? I couldn't possibly. One must suffer a bit for beauty after all." This casual acceptance of pain as part of beauty routines was deeply ingrained in Edwardian women, but the damage being done by radium cosmetics went far beyond temporary discomfort. Mrs. Harrington is literally burning her lips from the inside out, and the radium she's ingesting will continue to damage her body long after the lipstick is removed. After the last guest has departed, Mr. Harrington invites you to his study for a nightcap. He's in high spirits, pleased with the success of his party and the admiration his radioactive curiosities received. "Fascinating stuff, radium," he says, pouring brandy into crystal glasses. "Did you know they're using it to treat cancer now? Ironic, isn't it? The most expensive element in the world being used to help the sick." The irony runs far deeper than he realizes. Radium will indeed eventually be used in carefully controlled medical treatments, but it will also be recognized as a cause of cancer, not just a cure. And the casual exposure he and his household are experiencing is setting the stage for diseases that may not manifest for years or decades. "They say Madame Curie carries a vial of it in her pocket," Mr. Harrington continues, settling into a leather armchair. "Claims it helps her think more clearly, stimulates the brain, apparently. Marie Curie, who isolated radium along with her husband Pierre, would indeed suffer terribly for her prolonged exposure to radiation. Her notebooks remain too radioactive to handle safely even today, more than a century later. I'm thinking of having a radium treatment room added to the house," Mr. Harrington muses, swirling his brandy. "A small chamber where one could sit and enjoy the healthful emanations. They have them at the most exclusive spas in Europe, you know." What he's describing is essentially a gas chamber, a room where radon, the radioactive gas produced by radium's decay, would concentrate to levels that would significantly increase the risk of lung cancer and other radiation-induced diseases. "Do you think that's wise?" You venture cautiously. "It's such a new discovery. Perhaps it would be prudent to wait until the medical community better understands its effects." Mr. Harrington laughs dismissively. "Always the cautious one, aren't you? That's the trouble with people today. Too afraid to embrace the future. My grandfather was the same way about gaslighting. Insisted it would poison us all in our sleep. Meanwhile, the neighbours who installed it enjoyed bright, clean light while we squinted by candlelight for another decade." It's a false comparison, of course. While gaslighting had its dangers, they were immediate and obvious. Explosions, fires, carbon monoxide poisoning that showed symptoms right away. The dangers of radiation are invisible, cumulative, often taking years or decades to manifest, making it all the more difficult for Edwardians to connect cause and effect. As you sip your brandy, you notice a new addition to Mr. Harrington's desk, a small metal container with an airtight lid. "What's that?" you ask, though you suspect you already know. "Ah," Mr. Harrington's face lights up. "My latest acquisition, radium water tablets. Just drop one in your morning tea or coffee. Instant health tonic. Care to try one tomorrow at breakfast?" "I'll pass, thank you," you reply, trying to hide your horror. "Suit yourself." he shrugs. "But I've been taking them for a week now, and I've never felt better. More energy, better digestion, clearer thinking. The advertisements claim it can cure everything from arthritis to impotence." The advertisements lie. What those tablets are actually doing is delivering concentrated radiation directly to his digestive system, damaging tissues and cells with each dose. The energy he feels may be real. Radiation can indeed cause a temporary stimulant effect, but it comes at a terrible cost. Later that night, as you prepare for bed, you notice something disturbing, a faint glow coming from the direction of Mr. Harrington's dressing room. Curious and concerned, you quietly approach the partially open door. Inside, in the darkness, Mr. Harrington stands before a mirror, his face illuminated by an eerie blue-green light. It takes you a moment to realize what you're seeing. His teeth and fingernails are glowing in the dark. This phenomenon, you know from history, is a sign of significant radium ingestion. The radium has already begun to replace the calcium in his body, concentrating in his bones and teeth, where it will continue to irradiate surrounding tissues for the rest of his life, which may be considerably shortened by his enthusiastic embrace of this deadly health tonic. Mr. Harrington doesn't seem alarmed by this supernatural glow. On the contrary, he seems fascinated, examining his luminous smile and hands with childlike wonder. To the Edwardian mind, this visible manifestation of radium's presence in the body wasn't a warning sign. It was proof the product was working. You quietly retreat, unsettled by what you've witnessed. In your own comfortable bed at home, the most dangerous thing in your bedroom might be the electronics charging on your nightstand. But here, in this Edwardian house of horrors, even the people themselves are becoming radioactive, carrying their own slow death within their bones, glorying in the very symptoms that signal their poisoning. As you drift towards sleep, you can't help but wonder how many other invisible killers lurk in this elegant home, waiting to claim their unwitting victims. The Harringtons and their social circle embrace these deadly innovations with such enthusiasm, such faith in progress and modern science. They cannot know what you know, that their pursuit of health, beauty and sophistication through these radioactive wonders is leading them down a path to suffering and early graves. The thought is so disturbing that sleep eludes you. You lie awake in the darkness, listening to the gentle tick of the luminous clock on your bedside table, each second marked by radioactive decay that is simultaneously damaging the clock's own mechanism and exposing you to a continuous low dose of radiation. Even time itself is poisoned in this house of modern marvels, and tomorrow will bring yet more deadly innovations, more invisible hazards embraced as miracles of progress by a family that has no idea they're slowly killing themselves in the name of modernity. Morning arrives with an unexpected commotion. As you descend the stairs, still groggy from a restless night spent worrying about the radioactive clock beside your bed, you find the hallway crowded with concerned servants. At the centre of the gathering is Mrs. Brown, the cook, kneeling beside the prone form of Jenkins, the worker who had been coughing up blood while installing asbestos in the nursery. "He just collapsed, sir," she explains when she notices you. "1 minute he was carrying in the breakfast tray, the next he was on the floor, couldn't catch his breath." Jenkins' face is a ghastly shade of blue-grey, his breathing shallow and laboured. Each inhalation seems to cost him tremendous effort, and there's a rattling sound deep in his chest that reminds you of a machine with grit in its gears. "Someone's gone for Dr. Morris," the butler informs you. "Mr. Harrington asked that we move him to the servants' quarters in the meantime." Two footmen carefully lift Jenkins, whose body seems impossibly light for a grown man, and carry him away. As they turn the corner, you notice bright spots of blood on Jenkins' handkerchief, which has fallen to the floor in the commotion. "I told the master that boy wasn't fit for service," Mrs. Brown mutters, shaking her head as she picks up the handkerchief. "Been coughing like that for months now, getting worse every day. Has he seen a doctor?" you ask. Mrs. Brown gives a bitter laugh. "On a workman's wages? Not likely. Besides, there's dozens waiting to take his place if he can't do the job." This callous attitude toward worker health was typical of the era. The men and women who mined the asbestos, who installed it in fine homes like this one, who worked with the toxic chemicals and radioactive materials that made Edwardian life so convenient. They were considered expendable, their illnesses an unfortunate but acceptable cost of progress. At breakfast, the conversation revolves around poor Jenkins, though not with the sympathy you might expect. "Most inconsiderate, collapsing in the front hall like that," Mrs. Harrington complains, delicately cutting her toast into tiny pieces. "What if we'd had guests?" "The fellow's clearly been unwell for some time," Mr. Harrington agrees. "James should never have kept him on staff." You notice that Mr. Harrington's morning tea has an unusual tinge to it, slightly cloudy with an unnatural bluish cast. Then you remember the radium water tablets he mentioned last night. He's literally drinking radioactive poison with his breakfast, believing it to be a health tonic. More disturbing still, you notice young Henry watching his father with fascination, clearly envious of the special medicine his father takes each morning. "Can I have some of your special drink, father?" the boy asks hopefully. "When you're older, son," Mr. Harrington replies with a fond smile. "This is just for grown-ups. Small mercies," you think grimly. At least the child is being spared direct ingestion of radium, though he's still exposed to the asbestos in his nursery, the lead paint on his toys, and the ambient radiation from his father's growing collection of radioactive curiosities. The morning paper arrives, and Mr. Harrington disappears behind it, occasionally making small noises of interest or disapproval at what he reads. "I say," he remarks after a few minutes, "there's quite an interesting article here about those women who paint luminous watch dials. Apparently some of them are falling ill." Your attention sharpens immediately. "What does it say?" Mr. Harrington scans the article. A factory in New Jersey, several young women complaining of tooth and jaw problems. One girl's jaw actually broke when her dentist tried to extract a tooth. Can you imagine? The company doctors are calling it phossy jaw, similar to what match factory workers used to get from the phosphorus. This is it, the beginning of the radium dial painter's tragedy that would eventually expose the dangers of radium to the world. These radium girls, as they would come to be known, were instructed to lick their brushes to create a fine point for painting the tiny numbers on watch dials, ingesting radium with every lick. The radium settled in their bones, particularly their jaws, leading to horrific deterioration, cancer, and painful deaths. Does the article mention the cause? You ask carefully. They're investigating unhygienic conditions at the factory, Mr. Harrington replies dismissively. Probably poor nutrition among the working classes. You know how they are. Terrible diets, overcrowded housing. No wonder they're susceptible to disease. It would be years before the connection between radium and the women's suffering was officially acknowledged, and years more before any kind of compensation or justice was achieved. Meanwhile, products containing radium continued to be marketed to unwitting consumers like the Harringtons. The doorbell rings, and a moment later, James announces the arrival of Dr. Morris. "Show him to Jenkins at once," Mr. Harrington instructs. Then, almost as an afterthought, "and ask if he'll stop in before he leaves. I'd like his opinion on these new radium tonics I've been taking." Dr. Morris spends nearly an hour with Jenkins before appearing in the breakfast room, his expression grave. "How is the boy?" Mrs. Harrington asks, more out of politeness than genuine concern. "I've given him something to ease his breathing, but..." The doctor hesitates. "I'm afraid his condition is quite serious. His lungs are severely compromised." "Tuberculosis," Mr. Harrington suggests, keeping a cautious distance from the doctor, as if lung disease might be contagious through conversation. "No," Dr. Morris shakes his head. "I believe it's pneumoconiosis, specifically asbestosis, an industrial disease caused by inhaling asbestos fibres." The casual mention of asbestos catches Mrs. Harrington's attention. "Asbestos? But that's what we've just installed in the nursery. Are you suggesting it's unhealthy?" Dr. Morris looks uncomfortable, caught between medical honesty and the social awkwardness of telling his wealthy patrons that they've filled their home with a deadly substance. "There has been some concern in medical circles," he admits carefully, "particularly regarding workers who handle it regularly. The fibres can cause lung irritation when inhaled in large quantities over time. But surely that's only a concern for factory workers," Mrs. Harrington insists, a note of desperation in her voice. "Not for a respectable household like ours." "Or one would hope," the doctor agrees diplomatically, "though I might suggest keeping the nursery well ventilated just as a precaution, and perhaps regular dusting with damp cloths rather than dry dusters to minimize any airborne particles." This mild advice, a far cry from the complete asbestos removal that would be mandated in modern times, is met with relief by the Harringtons, who are clearly unwilling to consider that their expensive home improvements might be dangerous. "Excellent suggestion," Mr. Harrington says briskly. "We shall instruct the maids accordingly. Now, while you're here, I wanted to ask your professional opinion about these radium health tonics I've been taking." He produces the small metal container of radium water tablets, which the doctor examines with interest. "Ah yes, the new radiotherapeutic treatments," Dr. Morris nods, "quite popular in certain circles. The medical literature is still somewhat divided on their efficacy, but many of my colleagues speak highly of radium's stimulating properties." "And what about these?" Mrs. Harrington asks, presenting her collection of radium-infused beauty products. "They've been causing a slight burning sensation on my skin. Is that normal?" The doctor examines the elegant jars and bottles with their radioactive contents. "A certain amount of irritation is to be expected," he advises. "The radiation stimulates blood flow to the skin, creating a youthful flush. If the burning becomes too uncomfortable, perhaps try applying the creams less frequently or in smaller amounts." This tepid caution is the closest thing to a safety warning the Harringtons will receive about their radioactive beauty regimen. Dr. Morris, like most physicians of his era, has little understanding of radiation's true dangers. Medical science is still decades away from comprehending the full impact of chronic radiation exposure. After the doctor leaves, with instructions for Jenkins' care that amount to little more than rest and fresh air, Mr. Harrington retreats to his study while Mrs. Harrington goes to check on preparations for her sister's arrival. You find yourself alone with young Henry, who has been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the morning's events. "Is the servant man going to die?" he asks suddenly, his voice small but direct in the way that only children's questions can be. You consider lying to protect him, but something in his serious expression tells you he deserves honesty. He's very sick, you admit, from working with materials that aren't good for people's lungs. "Like the white fluffy stuff they put in my nursery?" Henry asks, proving himself more observant than his parents might credit. "Yes, You nod. That's called asbestos. It can make people sick if they breathe in too much of it. Henry's brow furrows in confusion. Then why did father put it in my room? It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How can you explain to a child that his parents have inadvertently filled their home with deadly materials in the name of progress and convenience? That the substances they believe represent the height of modernity and sophistication are slowly poisoning them all? Your father doesn't know it can be dangerous, you explain gently. Many people don't. They think it's a wonderful new material because it prevents fires. But you know, Henry points out with a child's unerring logic. Why don't you tell father? I've tried in a way. You sigh. But it's hard for people to believe that things sold in shops, things that everyone says are marvellous and modern, could actually be harmful. Henry considers this. Like father's glowing watch, the one he won't let me touch? Exactly like that, you nod, relieved that at least Mr. Harrington has the sense to keep the radium-painted timepiece away from his son, even if for the wrong reasons. Is that why your teeth don't glow like father's do? Henry asks innocently. Your blood runs cold. His teeth glow? Henry nods. I saw him looking at them in the mirror last night. They shine in the dark like the watch does. He says it's because of his special medicine, and when I'm bigger, I can take it too and have glowing teeth just like his. The horror of this strikes you anew. Mr. Harrington's body has already accumulated enough radium that his teeth and bones are literally glowing from radiation, and rather than recognizing this as a warning sign, he's presenting it to his son as something to aspire to. Before you can respond, Mrs. Harrington calls for Henry from the hallway. Come along, darling. We need to make sure your new suit fits properly before Aunt Charlotte arrives. The boy runs off, leaving you alone with the weight of what you've learned. The Harringtons, well-educated, wealthy, sophisticated people, are slowly killing themselves with the very products they believe represent the pinnacle of modern living, and they're completely blind to the danger, interpreting the very symptoms of their poisoning as signs of the product's efficacy. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Harrington's sister arrives with her infant daughter. The baby is immediately installed in the asbestos-lined nursery, sleeping in a crib with glow-in-the-dark, radium-painted details, surrounded by lead-painted toys, breathing air contaminated with asbestos fibres and coal dust. A perfect microcosm of Edwardian dangers, all concentrated around the most vulnerable member of the household. You watch from the doorway as Mrs. Harrington and her sister coo over the sleeping infant, both women wearing their toxic beauty products, both handling the baby with hands cream-coated in lead and mercury compounds, both breathing radioactive particles from the decorative items in the room. "Isn't the nursery beautiful?" Mrs. Harrington whispers proudly. "We've spared no expense to make it safe and modern." "It's lovely," her sister agrees, "so clean and bright, and I adore these glowing stars on the ceiling. Little Margaret will have such sweet dreams under them." Little Margaret, if she survives infancy in this poisonous environment, will likely carry the seeds of cancer, neurological damage, and respiratory disease into adulthood, the legacy of her early exposure to the Edwardian home's hidden killers. That evening, dinner conversation centres around the latest scientific marvels and inventions, with Mr. Harrington holding forth on the promising future of radioactive consumer products. They're developing luminous paint for all sorts of applications, he explains enthusiastically. Street signs, house numbers, light switches. Imagine never having to fumble in the dark again. And the medical applications are simply revolutionary, Mrs. Harrington's sister adds. My physician has prescribed radium baths for my postnatal recovery, says they'll restore my energy faster than anything else. Radium baths, where women would literally soak in radioactive water, absorbing radiation through their skin while breathing radon gas released by the water. Another deadly treatment marketed as the pinnacle of modern medical science. I've invested in a company that's developing radium-treated drinking water, Mr. Harrington announces proudly. They're building bottling plants across Europe. It's going to be the next big thing in health tonics. Speaking of health, his wife interjects, has anyone looked in on Jenkins today? Dr. Morris seemed quite concerned about his lungs. Mr. Harrington waves a dismissive hand. James says he's no better, no worse. If he doesn't improve by Monday, we'll have to send him home. Can't have an invalid taking up space in the servants' quarters indefinitely. Such a shame, Mrs. Harrington's sister comments. The working classes seem so susceptible to illness these days. Poor constitution, I suppose. The lack of self-awareness is staggering. These Edwardian elites slowly poisoning themselves with their expensive radium tonics and asbestos-filled homes, looking down on the poor constitution of workers who are suffering from the same toxic substances they're being paid poverty wages to handle. After dinner, the family gathers in the drawing room for music and conversation. Mr. Harrington proudly displays his latest acquisition, a set of glasses made with uranium glass which glows an eerie green under the electric lights. A complete set from wine glasses to cordial cups, he boasts, pouring brandy into one to demonstrate the effect. The uranium gives it that remarkable fluorescence, completely safe, of course. They've been making uranium glass for decades. Safe is a relative term. While uranium glass is indeed less dangerous than many of the other radioactive products in the Harrington home, the uranium is chemically bound in the glass, limiting radiation exposure. It's still emblematic of the Edwardian fascination with radioactive materials in everyday objects. As the evening progresses, you notice Mrs. Harrington's sister looking increasingly unwell. Her face is flushed and she keeps touching her forehead as if checking for fever. "Are you feeling all right, Charlotte?" Mrs. Harrington asks eventually. "Just a bit warm," her sister replies, "and a slight headache, probably just tired from the journey, but you suspect a different cause. Earlier, you observed Charlotte applying some of her sister's radium beauty cream, commenting on the pleasant tingle it created on her skin. What she's feeling now are likely the first symptoms of radiation exposure, the skin inflammation and headache that precede more serious effects." The evening winds down early, with Charlotte excusing herself to check on baby Margaret and then retire. As the household settles for the night, you find yourself drawn to the library, unable to sleep with the knowledge of all the invisible dangers surrounding this family. To your surprise, you find Mr. Harrington already there, poring over what appears to be a medical journal by the light of a single lamp. "Ah," he says, looking up when you enter. "Couldn't sleep either." "Too much on my mind," you admit, taking a seat opposite him. He nods distractedly, returning to the journal. Something about his expression, a furrowed brow, a tension around his mouth, suggests concern rather than his usual enthusiasm. "Interesting reading?" you venture after a moment of silence. He hesitates, then pushes the journal across the table to you. "What do you make of this?" "It's a report from a Dr. Harrison in Chicago about dental problems in workers painting luminous watch dials." You scan the article, which details cases eerily similar to those mentioned in the newspaper earlier. Young women with deteriorating jawbones, teeth falling out, infections that won't heal. The author makes a tentative connection to the radium paint they work with, noting that their bones and tissues seem to literally glow in the dark. Rather disturbing, isn't it? You say carefully, watching his reaction. Mr. Harrington runs a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncharacteristic uncertainty. It's probably exaggerated. These medical journals love to publish sensational cases, and yet... He trails off, and for the first time since you've been in this Edwardian house of horrors, you see a crack in his unwavering faith in modern progress. Jenkins' illness has me thinking, he continues slowly. Dr. Morris mentioned concerns about asbestos in medical circles, and now this business with the radium paint. He picks up his uranium glass, still half filled with brandy, studying the way it glows in the lamplight. One begins to wonder if perhaps we're embracing these new materials a bit hastily. It's a remarkable admission from a man who has built his identity around being on the cutting edge of technology and science. For the first time, he's questioning whether the miracles of modern progress might have a darker side. "I've been experiencing some unusual symptoms myself," he admits, his voice low as if confessing something shameful. "Headaches, a strange taste in my mouth, and my gums have been bleeding when I brush my teeth. These are classic symptoms of radiation poisoning, the early signs of the damage being done by his daily radium tonics. Perhaps you should stop taking those radium tablets," you suggest gently, just to see if the symptoms improve. He looks startled, as if the connection hadn't occurred to him until you pointed it out. You think they might be related, but they're health tonics. They're supposed to make one feel better, not worse. Not everything marketed as healthy actually is, you point out. Remember when they used to sell arsenic as a complexion treatment, or mercury as a cure for syphilis? Mr. Harrington winces. Fair point. Medical science does advance by correcting its mistakes, I suppose. He sets down his glass decisively. Perhaps a break from the radium tonics would be prudent, just until I'm feeling more the thing. It's a small victory, one man questioning one dangerous product, but it represents a crack in the Edwardian facade of blind faith in anything marketed as modern and scientific. This is how the tide would eventually turn against these hidden killers, not through sudden revelations, but through accumulated doubts, questions, and personal experiences that gradually undermined the marketing claims. "What about the nursery?" you ask, pressing your advantage. "If asbestos might have caused Jenkins' lung problems..." Mr. Harrington frowns. "That's a more complicated matter. The material is already installed at considerable expense, and the danger, if it exists, seems primarily to affect those who work with it regularly, like Jenkins." "But the fibres can become airborne during cleaning," you point out. "Your maids dust that room daily, and the children spend hours there breathing whatever is in the air." This gives him pause. The idea that his son, and now his infant niece, might be exposed to something harmful clearly troubles him more than concerns about his own health. "I'll speak to Emma about having the nursery cleaned differently," he decides. "Wet cloths instead of feather dusters, as Dr. Morris suggested, and perhaps we should keep the windows open more often for better ventilation." It's an inadequate solution by modern standards. Nothing short of complete asbestos removal would be considered acceptable today, but it represents an important shift in awareness. Mr. Harrington is beginning to recognize, however dimly, that the modern marvels filling his home might pose risks worth mitigating. The conversation continues late into the night, touching on other household hazards, the electrical wiring, the gas appliances, the lead-based paints, the mercury in cosmetics. With each topic, you gently plant seeds of doubt, not trying to frighten him, but simply encouraging a more cautious, questioning approach to new technologies. "It's rather overwhelming, isn't it?" he says finally, rubbing his eyes tiredly. "To think that one's home, which should be a sanctuary, might be filled with invisible dangers." Knowledge is the first step towards safety, you tell him. Just being aware of potential risks means you can take precautions. He nods thoughtfully. I shall write to the manufacturers of those radium tonics tomorrow, asking for more information about their safety testing, and perhaps I'll speak to an electrical engineer about our wiring system. Some of the connections have seemed rather questionable. As you rise to finally seek your own bed, Mr. Harrington calls after you. Thank you, by the way, for asking the uncomfortable questions that the rest of us have been too dazzled by progress to consider. It's a poignant moment, this Edwardian man standing at the crossroads between blind faith in technological progress and a more nuanced understanding of its potential dangers. Like society as a whole, he won't abandon his love of modern conveniences, but he's beginning to approach them with a more critical eye. The next morning, subtle changes are already visible in the Harrington household. The radium water tablets are noticeably absent from the breakfast table. The electric tablecloth has been replaced with conventional linen, and Mr. Harrington is giving instructions to James about improving ventilation in the nursery. We'll have the windows opened daily, weather permitting, he directs, and I want the maids using damp cloths for dusting in there, not the feather dusters. Very good, sir, James replies, though he looks somewhat puzzled by these unusual instructions. Mrs. Harrington seems equally confused by her husband's sudden caution. Really, Thomas, all this fuss over a bit of dust, she protests. The nursery will be positively chilly with the windows open all the time. Better chilly than, well, better safe than sorry, her husband replies firmly. And I've been thinking about your beauty creams as well, my dear. Perhaps you might inquire whether the manufacturers have versions without that radium ingredient, just as a precaution, you understand. Mrs. Harrington looks scandalized. But the radium is what makes them effective. Everyone is using radium preparations these days. Lady Pembroke swears by her radium facial masks. Nevertheless, Mr. Harrington insists, I would feel better if we exercised a bit more discretion in our adoption of these new substances, at least until the science is more settled. This caution, radical for an Edwardian household so devoted to being on the cutting edge, represents the beginning of a shift that would eventually transform how society approaches new technologies, from blind faith in anything marketed as modern and scientific, to a more measured approach that asks for evidence of safety before embracing innovation. It's a shift that would take decades to fully mature, with many more victims claimed by asbestos, radium, lead, and other hidden killers along the way. But the seeds of change are visible even here, in this Edwardian breakfast room, as one man begins to question the wisdom of surrendering his family's safety to the claims of advertisers and manufacturers. As you prepare to leave the Harrington household later that day, you find yourself on the nursery threshold watching young Henry play with his cousin Margaret. The asbestos is still in the walls, the lead paint still coats the toys, the radium-painted stars still glow faintly on the ceiling, but the windows are open, letting in fresh air, and a maid is carefully wiping surfaces with a damp cloth rather than sending dust flying with a feather duster. It's not enough, not nearly enough by modern standards, but it's a start, a recognition, however limited, that progress comes with responsibility and that the newest, most advanced option isn't always the safest or best. Mr. Harrington joins you at the nursery door, watching the children with a thoughtful expression. I've been considering what you said last night, he tells you quietly, about questioning new technologies more carefully. It's given me much to think about. It's a balancing act, you acknowledge, embracing the benefits of progress while being mindful of potential risks. He nods slowly. The trouble is knowing which risks are real and which are merely the fears of those resistant to change. My father refused to have gas lighting installed because he'd read about a single explosion in Manchester, yet millions of homes used gas safely for decades. True. You agree, but asking questions doesn't make one a Luddite, it makes one a responsible consumer of technology. Mr. Harrington smiles wryly, a novel concept that, being a consumer of technology rather than merely its enthusiastic adopter. He glances back at the children. When one has little ones to consider, perhaps caution isn't such a bad approach after all. As you take your leave of the Harrington household, you can't help but feel a mixture of hope and sadness. The family will continue to live with many of the hidden killers you've observed during your stay. Some damage, particularly from the radium Mr. Harrington has already ingested, is irreversible, and they remain largely unaware of many dangers still lurking in their beautiful home. But a seed of awareness has been planted. A crack has formed in the Edwardian faith that anything modern and scientific must, by definition, be good and safe. And that crack will widen over time as more evidence emerges of the harm caused by these unregulated, untested substances. The path from the Harringtons' elegant death trap to your own relatively safe modern home was long and often tragic. It was paved with the suffering of factory workers, the illness of consumers, the deaths of children, and eventually the activism of those who demanded better protection from the hidden killers of the industrial age. Regulations requiring safety testing of new materials, consumer protection laws, workplace safety standards, environmental controls, these safeguards, which you take for granted, were born from the hard lessons learned in places like the Harrington home, where progress outpaced understanding and convenience came at an invisible but terrible cost. As you make your way through modern London back toward your own time, you pass elegant Edwardian townhouses, much like the one you've just left. Behind their graceful facades, families just like the Harringtons are living with dangers they cannot see or understand, brewing their radium tea, powdering their faces with lead, lining their walls with asbestos, all in the name of being thoroughly modern. Some will be luckier than others. Some will question sooner, change their habits, avoid the worst exposures. Others will embrace every new radioactive product, every asbestos application, every electrical innovation regardless of safety, and pay the price with their health and sometimes their lives. But collectively, they are already moving, however slowly and unevenly, toward a greater awareness of the balance between progress and caution. The age of blind faith in technology is beginning to wane, making way for a more nuanced approach that asks not just what can we create, but also, is it safe? Is it necessary? Is it worth the risk? It's a question we still struggle with today in our world of microplastics and electronic radiation, air pollution and chemical preservatives. We may look back at the Edwardians with a mixture of horror and superiority, wondering how they could have been so careless with such obviously dangerous substances. But future generations may well look back at us with the same bewilderment, wondering how we could have been so cavalier about our own hidden killers. The lesson of the Edwardian home, with all its deadly innovations, is not that progress is inherently dangerous. Rather, it's that progress without careful assessment, regulation, and ongoing vigilance can unleash hazards that remain invisible until it's too late. It's a lesson we're still learning, still struggling to apply consistently in our modern rush toward the next technological breakthrough. And as you drift off to sleep in your own bed, free from asbestos, lead paint, and radioactive alarm clocks, perhaps that's the thought to carry with you, that the safety you enjoy was hard-won through decades of scientific research, consumer activism, and government regulation, and that maintaining that safety requires the same questioning spirit that Mr. Harrington tentatively embraced in his library that night. The hidden killers of the Edwardian home may be largely banished from your modern life, but the need for caution in the face of technological enthusiasm remains as relevant as ever. Sleep well, knowing that at least you won't be breathing asbestos fibres or absorbing radiation as you dream. That in itself is progress worth celebrating.